Hey guys, I'm Urizi. This story is all about what if Naruto was assigned to Asuma and Team 10. Mizuki never got to shoot his mouth off at Naruto the night he took the Scroll of Seals. Other than skipping a half-manic monologue from him, what exactly did this change for everyone's favorite blonde ninja? Who knows? Before we proceed with the story, please like and subscribe to this channel if you liked the video, and don't forget to check the description for the other works of the author if you liked the story. Let's start. Chapter 56, Without a Fight. Gaara was not pleased. That was possibly the understatement of the week. To find both of his siblings had been defeated while he had only suffered one blow in his battle with a very skilled opponent that he was about to completely overrun. For Kami's sake, he'd given himself so much sand to work with on that battlefield, there was no way he'd have lost. It would have been mean and very inaccurate to say that most of the talent in the family drifted his way, especially when that was partially due to the Shukaku being within him, but damn it. What have I told you all? Gaara said as he moved through the trees with Temari and Kankuro to catch up with the Konoha team that had escaped from him but left his brother and sister behind. Decently healed up, underestimating our enemies, is being burned once not enough for you too. Being rebuked by Gaara for their mistakes was much better than having to plead with him for sparing their lives, but it was still very annoying. It was a fluke, Gaara. Kankuro said. He had a right to be pissed off. He'd broken a genjutsu only to find that his puppet was about to be crushed by a giant, spiky ball. Sanshou wasn't crushed, but it did get mushed into the ground, and he did get knocked out from it. They didn't even kill us. They didn't kill us because they don't want to raise an issue with Suna. Temari said, glaring to the side at her face-painted brother. Even if we're just ninjas intruding on their mission, we're still the Kazekage's children. That does mean something out there, even if it doesn't seem like it to our father. My opponent tried to kill me. Gaara said calmly. I don't think he cared too much about the would-be connection between our villages. Any fraternal conversation was cut short the moment they seemed to cross a threshold, and intense killing intent that most of them had never felt before was placed upon them. So oppressive was it that Gaara had to stop tree running and lean up against the trunk of one to deal with it, holding his head and moaning softly in pain to himself. Gaara. Kankuro stopped to put a hand on his little brother's shoulder, but at the holding up of a hand, Gaara kept them back. What's going on? What's with this feeling? It's not Shukaku. Gaara said with a bit of difficulty. It's Uzumaki and the Kyuubi. He knew of that feeling anywhere, even if it was infinitely more imposing than the first time he'd had to face it. Why was I not informed that he was on this mission? Both Kankuro and Temari looked at each other with varying degrees of skepticism. Temari could have told him the moment that Team 7 had shown up and Gaara had arrived in chase of Sasuke and Kiba, but honestly, Gaara, Temari started to say, because we figured that you'd drop everything and go after him instead of stay on task. Who do you think I am? A guy that's really pissed off about the only fight you ever lost. Kankuro answered despite Gaara's question being rhetorical. You kind of obsessed about it for a year straight, even after we got promoted past Genin. You wanted to turn it down and go to the next Chunin exam in case he showed up again so you could kill him then. I did not obsess. Yes you did. A glare from Gaara got Kankuro to back off a few steps, but he kept his position. Killing me isn't going to make it any less true. Without another word, Gaara leapt off in a direction completely different from the one they'd been tracking Team 7 in, much to the consternation of his siblings who had to follow along to keep the squad together. Gaara. Temari urged, trying to use some kind of authoritative tone with him. We do not know that the team with the Uchiha in it is going to where Tsunade is. Gaara said in an effort to reason. They could be decoys. If I were running a mission, I would keep the most capable and durable fighter with the target. Uzumaki is the best possible choice for protecting her. Last time I checked, Gaara, that kid didn't have an automatic defense like you do. Temari said, more or less deriding the idea of Uzumaki Naruto being anyone's main protection in a security or escort detail. Gaara's eyes flickered in her direction before turning back in his intended direction. There isn't very much need for defense when you can tear apart whatever is in front of you with brute force. Then why the hell were they going that way in the first place? The answer was because Gaara wanted to see. It was rare when he ever got to see another Jinchuriki in battle, and Shukaku was screaming for him to go and prove that just having one tail didn't make him weaker than Naruto's Biju. Gaara wasn't going to open that can of worms, maybe. He just wanted to see what growth his reviled enemy had taken on over the last few years. Get down and behind something. A sudden blast of air flew their way, and it was only due to Tamari's early warning that they weren't blown haplessly off of their perches. Due to the heavy debris flying past their places of hiding, they were all certain that if they hadn't been warned in advance, they'd be hurtling back through the woods bonelessly, hoping they didn't smack fatally off of something solid or jagged. What the hell? Kankuro said as he and his siblings dropped from the branches, taking cover behind the trunks of trees as the wind howled and weaker trees groaned and cracked under the force of the wind. What the hell is going on? Tamari. The only thing he could do was ask their resident wind specialist as to what was happening. There's no cutting power to this jutsu. Tamari tried to shout up over the wind, but it doesn't need it. It's strong enough without it. She couldn't estimate how fast the wind was blowing, but trying to keep her footing in front of it didn't seem possible in the slightest. She felt that if she'd put her arm or leg out into it, she'd wind up with a dislocated limb or a completely lost one entirely. There were flecks of red that flew right along in the direction of the wind that Gaara could attribute to Naruto. And he could smell the blood in it. Moments earlier, with Naruto, decrepit fishing village. If one could ever recognize the feeling of constantly having one's skin forcibly removed and replaced, they would tell you that it was what hell must have been like, and why would someone willingly subject themselves to such torment for any prolonged period of time whatsoever? Naruto would not be amongst those people. Yes, it hurt like no other pain that could be comparable in his life, but focusing his willpower on the pain was what kept him in control when he was releasing that level of the Kyuubi's chakra. A lack of focus outside of taking down an enemy was his faltering point in keeping control of himself in the past with the other stages of chakra intensity. Whatever he was thinking about at the time of utilizing the heightened power would be magnified in importance in his mind once he stepped it up, so if he had been thinking that he needed the power to defeat his enemy or make them pay when he'd been moving up steadily to the four-tailed level, by the time he actually got that far, defeat would become annihilate. Instead, he shifted his focus to how goddamn much Four Tails form hurt, to keep him from losing himself. It also helped because it made him desperately wish to hurry up and put an end to the fight that forced him to go that far to begin with, so that he could stop with the self-induced torture. Naruto's tails had carved a trench into the ground behind him with the way that they were constantly whipping in a circle like fan blades, and his solid eyes were focused solely on Darui, who wondered why Naruto wasn't rampaging. You can control it. Heh. The Kyuubi wished that Darui could hear him the way Naruto could. He can endure it. Control is too complete a word for what he has. He's too weak to control me. Grr. Naruto gritted out. It wasn't that he was feral or was trying to give the illusion that he wasn't in control. Being in four-tailed form fucking hurt. He didn't want to waste focus actually using words. Even though he didn't say anything, he sent out his chakra arms to attack Darui and keep him away while Tails started picking up the pace, spinning faster and faster, something that Darui figured he was doing to occupy his mind so that he didn't slip away and descend into madness. Basically, his mindset was that if he could stop the motion of the tails and make Naruto focus back on the fighting, he'd have a berserk Jinchuriki to deal with. Kumo-Gakure knew how to deal with those well enough. That meant that Naruto was about to receive another attack that he couldn't dodge. After managing to fend off Naruto's chakra claws with enough agility to escape their impressive range, he squared up and decided on a ranged ninjutsu attack, Ranton, Rizasakasu, Storm Release, Laser Circus. From his hands he formed a gigantic orb of light that shot off dozens of branching light beams aimed right at Naruto. Naruto did move away from the swift-moving ninjutsu, allowing his tails to somehow bat away each shot that had been aimed at him when he was able to alter the fan pattern of his tails in front of his body. Contact with even two should have killed another shinobi, and factoring in that Naruto wasn't normal even then, he should have been devastated with the amount that made contact. Darui didn't understand how they didn't affect him and shock him, even through the chakra tails, at least until he felt his hair begin to blow. There shouldn't have been any wind that night. There hadn't been any wind that night until right then, and it was steady, and getting stronger. The wind was being generated by Naruto's tails as at the ends of them he was creating a gust and using the propeller motion to blow outward. It was the basis of the first wind jutsu that Asuma had taught him as a genin, only meant to do something entirely different. The speed and the wind picked up to the extent that Darui had to cover his eyes with his arms to keep debris from around the half-destroyed fishing village from getting into them. He stuck himself to the ground with chakra, endeavoring to stand up and face whatever this was. Somehow, wind release. He would have the elemental nature that trumps mine, wouldn't he? As the wind picked up, a jet noise could be heard, and Naruto took that as his cue to raise his hands up and form a more resolutely powerful incarnation of wind chakra. With a forceful grunt, the length of his tails expanded, as did the width to the actual shape of circular fan blades, as they continued to spin. Futon, Akeo Shimpyu, wind release, red-tailed typhoon. A well-aimed directional subsonic blast of air blew forth in a controlled funnel, leaving a destructive trail in its wake. Darui tried to dodge around it, but Naruto could turn to aim without stopping the blurry whirling of his tails whatsoever. So intense was the exterior of the funnel that it effortlessly stripped the soil 5 feet down. Everything close around him in the path got chunked up into mulch and was sent forward along with the wind and the red glow of his chakra. A dark chuckle could be heard as clear as a bell in Naruto's mind. Very good, Naruto. Not quite as good as I would have done with the same level of power at my disposal, but not quite a disappointment either. You left your mark on this land, I would say. Watching from a safe distance away from the battlefield, Samui had to watch in silent awe when she saw the destructive force of one jutsu. She was quite certain that such a jutsu could destroy the majority of an entire sector of a modern village in a circular pattern if he aimed it around himself. Fortunately, he wasn't aiming it in a general circle. It was being fired away from them. At Darui. And he wasn't turning anymore to track and aim at him, which meant that he'd caught the man up in the blast. That wasn't good. The blonde Kumo woman couldn't believe it. Only years of maintaining the cold facade that was her usual demeanor kept her from giving her poker face away, but it was a struggle to keep from showing on her face that she was very much affected by this. He couldn't be dead. Darui was the right-hand man of the Raikage, basically his closest confidant. A master of black lightning that he was taught by the Sandaime Raikage, storm release aside, he was a ninja that many in Kumo looked up to. To think that both he and Omoi could be dash. No, she didn't want to think about it. And it was actually a good thing that Kurui was out of it. Losing Omoi was enough of a major blow to her psyche. To realize that Darui had been finished, it would be hard to consider how she would react to that, but it wouldn't have been in a calm manner. Kurui's jaw dropped at the sight of the damage, though it was really Ino's psyche inside of her body doing it. Is that really Goldie-kun? Unfortunately, yes. Shikamaru said, wiping a bead of sweat away from his brow as he saw Naruto immediately bringing out the big guns to put the fight to an end. The sooner he gets out of that the better, but the damage is already done. What damage? The part where his skin gets burned through because the chakra is so intense. Shikamaru said, staring at his partner seriously, that's not just a chakra shroud. That's his blood mixed in with the chakra. What? This was the cost for the power of a Jinchuriki? None of that used to happen when Naruto utilized the chakra. It didn't happen in Mizu no Kuni. Samui kept quiet and reserved at Darui's demise, but she tucked this information away for posterity. They were doing a good job of refraining from saying it around her while still getting across the point of how dangerous Naruto's four-tailed form was, but she knew enough about Jinchuriki due to the two famed ones in Kumo to recognize this much. That if using the chakra caused that kind of harm, he didn't have complete control of the Kyuubi's chakra. He was an imperfect Jinchuriki. Killer Bee, Kumo's most powerful Jinchuriki, was perfect. Niyujito, while without the flawless control that Killer Bee had, still had greater control than this boy Naruto had. Their version 2 forms engulfed their entire bodies like Naruto's did, but it did not hurt them the way it did him. If only Konoha had put this Uzumaki boy through the paces that Killer Bee and Yujito had been put through at young ages to control their respective Biju. He was able to kill Darui on his first attempt after tapping into his version 2 level of power. Had he been properly given instruction for handling that awesome power within him sooner than the age of 12, but that was not the case. Coming that far in only 3 years when others took at least a full decade to grow that powerful. Still, Killer Bee and Yujito were beyond him. This she believed with all that she was. This display did nothing to make her believe otherwise. This mission is a complete and utter failure. Samui thought, closing her eyes as if to shield them from the truth of what she had to accept. We cannot defeat them, not with what they have fighting with them, and we cannot complete our original assignment. She herself was injured to the point where she needed healing to walk. There wasn't going to be any way that she and Kurui would finish their mission, even if they had managed to win at this juncture. Shikamaru looked around and deemed it all clear before sticking his fingers in his mouth and letting out a loud whistle to get Naruto's attention. Naruto, get over here and turn that damn thing off. Ino in Kurui's body recoiled and took a step back upon looking into the solid white eyes of Naruto's four-tailed form. So soulless. And then she barely saw him at all as he blazed toward them, chakra flaring wildly. Naruto, that's Ino. Naruto slid to a harsh stop, dragging a trench into the ground and coming to a halt just within reaching distance of Ino. She could feel the sheer heat from the chakra as if it were an open flame. She reached out a shaky hand to try and touch his face when she felt Shikamaru's hand grab hers, or Kurui's in this case. It's not hot just for show. Shikamaru said, it'll burn you, badly. It's toxic. Now turn it off already, Naruto. It's killing you. Oi, don't try to hurry me up. Naruto said, gritting his teeth as his tail swished around to try and occupy his mind. You're in a real rush to see me suffer, aren't you, Shika? Fool, it was because he didn't want to see him suffer that he wanted him to return to normal. Okay, walk around glowing like a damn lantern until dawn and knock 15 years off of your lifespan. Shikamaru said, it's not like you don't already hurt like hell. Look at you. You can't hold still for half a second, you're in so much pain. Naruto just turned and stared at Shikamaru before turning over to Ino. He really wished that she didn't have to see this, but, well, he was going to have to undo it eventually. Seriously, the longer it stayed on, the worse things were for his lifespan. The only reason he used it was because Darui was a powerhouse, and they didn't have the time for him to try and fight with him for too long. Their mission was to stay with Tsunade. Never say that Shikamaru wasn't intelligent though, in more matters than just battlefield strategy. Ino, take that girl's body and get the other one on their way out of here. I told her that we would. Ino, in Kurui's body, looked as if she wanted to protest, but he had given his word in order to detain Samui peacefully that if she didn't try anything funny they would let them go. Okay. But the moment I get them far enough away I'll be right back in my body, got it? I won't be long. With that she went over to Samui, and the defeated Kumo Kunoichi could do nothing more than allow Ino to lift her up piggyback style to begin carrying her away. My comrades. Samui said, what about their bodies? It was too much to ask that she request their bodies back. A ninja's body could divulge very important secrets in autopsy. She was on the losing side of this conflict, and the loser couldn't dictate terms, but again it couldn't hurt to ask. What was the worst that she could say? No? You can have them. Ino said, surprising Samui. Her voice sounded quite hollow as she explained, this wasn't a battle we wanted to fight. I know it's not protocol, but if I lost one or two of my teammates in one mission, especially since one of them was on your genin team, wasn't he? So was the girl I'm in right now. She remembered, of course, because there was no way she could ever forget anything about the Chunin exams that they'd originally come across each other in, even if they didn't meet directly in those days. We'll find their bodies and seal them away on the way out. It was a small mercy after Naruto had decimated two of them at least. Even if she was absolutely certain that the same wouldn't have been done for them had the positions been reversed. You're an idiot, you know that. Shikamaru asked as Naruto lay on the ground, missing the top layer of skin from his body, trying to be macho and not let Ino see you like this. She could have healed you before she left. Kiss my ass. Naruto said, extremely grateful that despite not having a top layer of skin on more than half of his body he wasn't bleeding profusely. Once again, it hurt like hell though. I don't need you telling me how to deal with the fallout from my own stuff. The way she makes you act sometimes is troublesome. Shikamaru said, taking enough mercy on Naruto's current state of being to stick a cigarette in his mouth and light it for his friend. I'm not saying that using the Kyuubi's chakra was the wrong thing to do, because it wasn't. That guy was tough and we didn't have time for saving any tricks. But you went for tails, Naruto. What did we agree on about that? Unless I'm absolutely sure someone around me's gonna die and I don't have another choice, don't fucking transform. Naruto said as if he were recanting something he'd been told several times already. Jiraiya, Tsunade, Shizune, every single guardian, and Shikamaru as well said as much to him. Don't fucking transform. Shikamaru repeated in the third person, exactly. And why'd you do it here? Because Three Tails wasn't getting the job done. How would you know? You barely stayed in Three Tails to fight him. Shikamaru said, calling him on it as he had seen it. You saw that lightning guy take a shot at Ino, and you were still pissed about it even after you finished the Omoi guy off. I didn't get pissed. You did get pissed. You're still pissed about it right now. Stop being pissed. You killed him. It felt good, didn't it? The Kyuubi shimmered in from within Naruto after Shikamaru had given his last statement. What, did he mean losing an entire layer of skin? Hell no, that didn't feel good. I mean to destroy your enemies like that. Just imagine how it would have been if you'd allow yourself to slip further, or yet, give me the reins. I'm more experienced at matters of destruction than you. Yeah, but there was the entire matter of the fact that killing people didn't make him feel good, even after an intense battle like with Kimimaro and Itachi where he'd earned the win with blood. We'll talk later. Naruto thought to his inner Biju before addressing Shikamaru, I'm going to blame it on a lack of sleep and nicotine for as long as we've been on this mission. He said, breathing smoke out past his cigarette. I'm fine now. Seriously. I'll tighten the seal back after the skin grows back on my stomach if it'll make you feel better. A growl then went off in his head, we'll talk about it later. He wasn't going to tighten a damn thing back up. That was for Shikamaru. The seal's not the problem. Shikamaru insisted with a sigh, I know you can handle the seal. No one our age is going to be better with them than you. It's your head when Ino's around. You've been weird ever since we got back. Weird? What was weird to him? Naruto didn't think he was being weird. But he figured he was being normal by his own standards. He did get pissed and he knew that he did. Even right then he felt terrible about how he reacted. Ending a life the way he ended him was. It was brutal. Seriously, I'm not mad anymore. Naruto said, sighing before wincing at his wounds, it's fine. Look, can we just finish the mission? I just killed 2 people and I feel like an ass about it. Life of a ninja or not, killing someone never made him feel victorious in the aftermath, it made him feel terrible, sitting here, talking about chick problems that I may or may not have ain't gonna get us back to Tsunade Bachin any faster. Tisk. Shikamaru rolled his eyes and, when Ino gets back to her body she can heal you, then we can go. She's going to bitch you out after she sees you like that, but that's your problem. He noticed Naruto's eyes sharpen up and tensed up himself, what's wrong? I feel something else coming. Something else. Both young Chunin stood back up and faced the direction that Naruto had chosen to turn in only for it to be occupied in a matter of a minute by Gaara, Temari, and Kankuro of Tsunagakure. Both Temari and Kankuro looked cross, and rather worn, which probably meant that Team 7 had been able to handle them to an extent. Gaara instead was staring directly at Naruto. With his current health issues, Gaara could feel Shukaku screaming in his head to take him down and see what the rest of his blood looked like, kill him. He's right there. He looks worn. Take him out. Finish him off. You know you want to. I want you to. Listen to your mother. Luckily, Gaara's improved relationship with his brother and sister let him learn things about their mother that he hadn't ever been privy to prior. You are not my mother. Be silent. The only indication Gaara gave off of his discomfort in front of Naruto and Shikamaru was a momentary closing of his eyes. Gaara. Kankuro said, gesturing his head at Naruto and Shikamaru, what do we do? He's the one you want to kill, isn't he? It took a long while, as Gaara just stared Naruto down, contemplating deeply before he finally spoke up as the leader of the squad, no. Not like this. When I kill Uzumaki Naruto I want it to be with our full power against one another. With that, he took steps in Naruto's direction and stopped within reaching distance of him, but Naruto didn't back up a step. It has been a long time. Yeah, a real long time. Naruto replied, staring Gaara down directly, listen, killing me or not, you need to know. Akatsuki. A group is out there called Akatsuki made up of the world's strongest missing nin, and they want all of the biju, so watch your back. Shikamaru sent Naruto a momentary look, but realized that one way or another it was best that the other Jinchuriki were informed if they weren't already. You want to fight me again as well one day? Gaara asked, sounding somewhat pleasantly surprised. No. I never want to fight you again actually. Are you nuts? Naruto said in return, don't answer that actually. But you seem less mad at everything now. Less lonely, and I've killed enough people today. Gaara knew that. The air was filled with the smell of blood. Granted, most of it was Naruto's since he'd blown the scent over most of the little destroyed fishing village along with his chakra aura, but it still smelled like blood nonetheless. Your concern is unnecessary. Gaara said back to him, if there is anyone out there that wishes to take Shukaku from me, they can feel free to try. So now what? Temari asked, eyeing the motionless body of Ino nearby the two other Konoha ninja, what about the mission Gaara? Konoha has Tsunade with them right now. I care nothing about this mission. Gaara admitted rather bluntly, it's a vanity assignment that father gave us. Contrary to what he says, we do not need Tsunade and Tsunagakuer and I am not here to return her home. I simply took this mission for one reason, the hopes of meeting you in battle again. This sounded strange and far-fetched, but it was true. Any high-level mission where it seemed as if Konoha would be involved, Gaara wanted to take it. He wanted to have another chance at fighting against the only person that had defeated him directly before. For 3 years he did this whenever the opportunity presented itself without the results he wished for. And now, he wouldn't even be able to enjoy the struggle. And he really wanted to fight him. Temari and Kankuro knew this, but they didn't know that fighting Naruto outweighed the missions that they'd gone on with him. Gaara. Kankuro said, trying to reason with his brother, Dad's going to be pissed at you if you say that to him. Then I won't say it. As the Kazekage he should know better than to divert a village resource like a Jinchuriki to something like this. Turning his back and walking away from Naruto, back through his siblings, Gaara got a few more feet away before stopping. Kankuro, Temari, we're leaving. Leaving? Temari questioned. Aborting missions left a sour taste in her mouth, but things had gotten progressively worse as it seemed to all break down. Fighting to salvage something out of getting Tsunade had not gone as well as hoped, and even if Gaara ran the gauntlet of Konoha ninja protecting her, they'd then probably wind up getting on her bad side in the process. Alright, fine. With that, the odd Tsunagakuer siblings, children of the Yondaime Kazekage, departed the area as quickly as they arrived, eliciting a sigh of relief from both Naruto and Shikamaru. I could have taken him. Naruto said after Gaara had departed, I just really don't want to fight that guy again, you know. However, this meeting was infinitely more pleasant than the last time they'd come across each other. Yeah, I know. Shikamaru said in return. Seriously. Give me 5 minutes, I could have taken it to him. Are you trying to convince me or you? Whose side are you on, Shika? In a matter of minutes, Ino's body stirred on the ground and came back into functionality once her mind rejoined with it, and one of the first things she caught sight of was the current state of Naruto. Oh my kami, what the hell happened to you? Forests of Hinokuni. Kiba and Akamaru flew through the trees en route to the bounty station that was the target objective, even as the sun peeked over the horizon just a touch. But Kiba was not running, he was riding, because he was unable to continue running any longer. Seething to himself in pain as he rode Akamaru, Kiba's pants were stained with blood from inexplicable wounds on his legs. What the fuck is this? He said before more shocks of pain jolted through him. Why am I bleeding? What's going on? Grabbing a kunai, he cut up the leg to find actual wounds on his body. But where did they come from? The only injury he received was that little bloody nick he took when he drilled that guy with the scythe into the dirt. Gah! Another stab wound found its way into his leg, forcing more blood from the injury. Akamaru whined in concern, but Kiba was not going to stop just because of that. Just keep going, boy. What was happening? Elsewhere in the countryside, Shino and Hinata watched as a ghastly-looking Hidan seemed to keep stabbing himself in the leg and waiting on some kind of reaction to come from one of them. Needless to say, both were stunned. Moments ago he acted as if he had them checkmated, and now he couldn't seem to understand why whatever he was doing wasn't working the way he had intended it to. Come on! The maniacal Akatsuki member said as he stabbed himself in the leg one more time with a retractable pike and shrieked in pain that he was expecting to be sharing with one of the Team 8 members in front of him. One of you drop already. Whose blood did I get then? I swear to Jashin, it better not have been my blood. What are you talking about? Shino asked, still standing at the ready in case this was all just a ploy to lower their guard to get close to them again. This is supposed to link me to one of you worthless little shits. Hidan angrily explained, it has to be one of you. You're the only ones I've been fighting. But it wasn't one of them. Hidan hadn't injured one of them enough to draw blood from them despite his previous unending pursuit until Kiba interjected. Oh no, Kiba. Before departing, Kiba had sported a few cuts that he couldn't explain getting from his last successful attack on the odd Akatsuki member. Was he nicked by the blades of that weapon in the process? And if he was, Hidan didn't realize it because Kiba had been so quick in his attack and so quick in leaving at their prompting. This could either be really good or really bad. Really good because he hadn't tried anything fatal that he could survive and Kiba couldn't. Really bad because he'd still stabbed himself several times and if he was linked to Kiba he'd have been injured as well. Shino-kun. Hinata said quietly, what are we going to do? Kiba was at risk, even if Hidan didn't wound himself any further, they couldn't fight him without hurting Kiba as well, could they? Shino had been looking at Hidan long and hard, and his gaze had been attracted to around the man's feet. Hinata, do you see that circle around his feet? What is that? Hinata's Byakugan was on, but she had been so occupied and caught off guard by everything that had already been happening that she almost missed what Shino was talking about. There's a chakra connection running through that symbol, going into Hidan. Get him out of the circle first and foremost, and with their abilities, step 2 would be to destroy the circle. Doing that without hurting him would be the biggest problem presented to them, because hurting him would be hurting Kiba as well. But if there was chakra running through the circle, maybe they could do something about that. Shino forcefully clasped his hands together, fingers interlaced, before he moved his arms out in Hidan's direction. I had this set up in advance, but then this happened. Hihutsu, Mushidama, secret technique, insect sphere. From the grass around Hidan, thousands and thousands of Kikaicha rose up around Hidan in the form of a ball that surrounded his body. You've been checked. Oh. Hidan taunted, faking fear, you're gonna drain my chakra and yak 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 yak. So what? You can stab me, burn me, blow me up, suck out my chakra, but you can't kill me. What are you going to do? You'd better make it count. Juhosao Shiken, gentle step twin lion fists. With his vision obscured by the insects swarming all about, Hidan didn't get to see Hinata moving around the battlefield to a vulnerable point at his back to attack him from. Around both of her hands, 2 shrouds of blue chakra formed in the shape of lion heads. Dumb bitch. Hidan thought to himself, preparing to take the blow. It wouldn't do anything fatal even if it landed, all she's going to do is fuck up whoever I'm connected to. Feeling a pull on something connected to his chakra, Hidan figured it was Shino's bugs trying to suck him dry, but when he looked down he saw portions of his circle had been ruined by layers of insects in certain places. No. The connection. He can't possibly dodge this. Hinata thought to herself as she pushed her arms forward to smash Hidan with her most powerful taijutsu, hopefully in his spine so that she could possibly paralyze him. The chakra in the circle is gone. Not fast enough, little girl. Hidan turned on his heel and lashed out with a scarily well-aimed kick to Hinata's face, avoiding her jutsu-covered hands in the process. Ha! I hope that broke something. Hinata's body landed on the ground hard, her head swimming from the boot she'd just received at the hands of the deceptively strong Hidan. My strongest attack jutsu failed. So this is how scary an S-rank ninja can be. I'm the slowest member of Akatsuki. Hidan admitted with a smirk as his skin returned to normal from the Grim Reaper look it had been sporting moments before, but you're not fast enough to catch me off guard with something like that. With a vulnerable little strumpet on the ground prime for attack, Hidan hurled his scythe at her like a flail via the cable attached to it underneath his cloak sleeve. On the ground as she was too good a target to pass up. Mushi came no jutsu, insect jar jutsu. A large amount of Shino's insects rapidly flew around Hinata's body in a dome formation with a strong enough force to protect her, bouncing Hidan's scythe off of it. Not good enough. Hidan caught the scythe out of the air while running to the insect dome before he began slashing it apart with reckless abandon. Now let me share some pain with you, honey. As the insects began to dissipate, Hidan lifted his scythe high overhead to bring it down on the pale-eyed Hyuga-chinin. Almost. Hinata thought to herself, having gotten back onto her feet with the time gifted to her to recover from Hidan's counter-attack. Now. Shigo Haku Rokyu Yan Shao, protection of the 8 trigrams 64 palms. Seemingly like a dance, Hinata spun swiftly, her palms and fingertips nimbly producing a constant flow of chakra that she formed into a sharp net field around her body to protect herself from Hidan's pending attack. Due to the insects of Shino that had been obscuring her to an extent, the thin glow of the chakra was concealed until the scythe breached past them. The immortal Akatsuki member found his attack not only blocked, but his right arm was severed just under the elbow. Wow! That was some sharp chakra. The kind of control it must have taken to force one's chakra into that tight a form and keep it powerful enough to be like a blade. He was no stranger to getting limbs removed in battle, however. When Hinata's jutsu repelled him and took his arm along with it, he backed up as if he'd been repelled, simultaneously switching his weapon to his other hand with sleight of hand. The second that stupid field of chakra dropped. And once it did, he hurled his scythe at her again, this time at a much closer range, too quick for her to reenact her defensive measures. With awe-inspiring flexibility she bent back and placed her hands on the ground, allowing the scythe to pass over her as she flipped out of the way. While it was unexpected, it wasn't entirely unaccounted for, and Hidan had already been rushing forward to follow up even before she dodged his last move, his pike drawn and extended to run her through. You'd better hope this kills you. Still vulnerable from the last evasive action she'd taken, Hinata landed back on her feet to find Hidan within a few steps of stabbing into her with his secondary weapon. As he moved his arm forward to finish the job, Shino's body jumped in front of hers and took the blow instead before dissipating into a swarm of insects. What was with these brats? Hidan and Kakuzu mowed down a whole platoon of Umbu before they'd caught up to the Tsunade escort squad. He was not about to accept the fact that 2 stupid Konoha clan runts were good enough to keep him from eviscerating them. It was a clash of styles, really. That was all. Shino didn't fight close, and Hinata almost had to. While Hinata gave him the distraction, Shino was the main attacker. Using whatever opening the Hyuga princess could provide him to. You say that you're not afraid of having your chakra drained. This is foolish. Why, you ask? Shino calmly said as his insects attempted to overrun Hidan once again after allowing Hinata to escape grievous harm. Because immortal or not, you should always have a healthy fear of your opponent's ninjutsu. Why fear what can't kill you? Hidan asked, licking his lips as he warded off the insects with skillful spins of his scythe. That's what immortality is all about. I don't fear anything you weak little shits can do to me. No one can kill me. There are worse things than death. Let's test that, shall we? Stopping his retreat from Shino's bugs, Hidan took a deep breath and unzipped the front of his robe to reveal his open chest. Taking his pike, he quickly carved out a bloody symbol of Jashin on his torso and made a set of hand seals, holding the last one as the insects engulfed him. Jujitsu, Chimhi Setsuzoku Osagyo, Curse Technique, Controlling Fatal Connection. The Kakaicha began to suck Hidan dry, but something strange began to happen. Shino began to feel his own chakra reserves weaken and falter as well for seemingly no reason. They were running low at a rate that he could attribute to being similar in how an enemy's chakra would be drained by his insects. Hidan's skin temporarily switched to the black color with the white skull-like markings. What is this? Shino began sweating and looked for the symbol of Jashin at Hidan's feet, but even if it had been there, Hidan had never gotten a single drop of his blood. With no other option, he called off the attack off his Kakaicha. With the amount of chakra he'd lost, the hive that was his body was already going to suffer enough for the dearth of energy. Heh. Hidan chuckled to himself despite his own showing of the loss of chakra. Well, I guess that useless-ass jutsu ain't as useless as I thought it was. I'd rather hurt you idiots myself, but having you do the honors to yourselves is almost as good. Shino found himself staring at the symbol on Hidan's body as the man's skin color returned to normal. It didn't stay that way like it had when he'd ingested Kiba's blood. It only turned that way when the bugs started draining his chakra. Were they to attack him, as long as he could activate that jutsu, they would wind up taking the damage from their attacks on him. It was a crash and see who could stand up situation. A technique that favored a battle of attrition. Hidan was immortal, he could take it. No one else could. This really is an S-rank ninja. Shino thought to himself, sunglasses hiding the pensive look on his face. The sight of the slug princess falling to the ground motionless put a smile on Kakuzu's face underneath his face mask. As his elemental masks rebounded with his body, he walked over to her to ensure that she was dead. She'd been badly electrocuted by one of his strongest, fastest lightning techniques while she was surrounded by water. Oh. Hashirama countered that one. Kakuzu said as he stood over her. Reaching down at her neck, he felt no pulse and prepared to seal her body away for safekeeping. And they weren't that far away from the bounty station either, so he could cash in on her corpse within the hour. I guess enough of the clan talent didn't trickle down to his spoiled little granddaughter, did it? An S-rank medicnin is still just a medicnin, I guess. He felt a little static jolt come from her as he let go so that he could grab a ceiling scroll. Thump thump. Kakuzu's eyes widened as he was still close enough to feel Tsunade's pulse kick in for one strong beat. The arm he'd just felt for her signs of life with wound up clutched in the impossibly strong, crushing grip of the blonde woman. You say that like being a medic is an insult. Kakuzu could have sworn that even though his guts were insulated with an uncountable amount of black threads due to the earth grudge fear kinjutsu, the punch that came from Tsunade as she rose off of the ground squished up his organs on the inside. The only thing that kept him from flying off into the distance was the fact that she'd been holding onto him the entire time. Actually, it did more than that, as Tsunade had been pulling on his arm to reel him deeper into the punch to begin with. Not only had she effortlessly dislocated his shoulder, her fist sailed straight through his chest and out through the back in a bloody, rib cage destroying mess, pulling a ragged breath from Kakuzu as he sank to his knees. Laying face down in the soaked ground, Kakuzu's odd green and red eyes rolled back in his head and right forward again. Two of my hearts. He said as he inhaled harshly with his severely damaged lungs. She destroyed two of my hearts with that punch. Jumping back, Tsunade looked down at the hand that she'd used to punch straight through Kakuzu. Her bare arm was covered in his blood up to her bicep. I'm glad I got over the whole hemophobia thing with the brat. Making a fist with her bloody hand, Tsunade looked over at Kakuzu, who had just risen from the dead. The massive hole in his chest that she'd just created was closing itself off with black threads. 2 down, 3 to go. Tisk. Having more lives, so to speak, made Kakuzu more prone to making mistakes that he would have avoided before he'd taken on his signature jutsu to prolong his life. Consider that a freebie, girl. You will not get another chance like that again. Hashirama, for all of his power that clearly overwhelmed what Tsunade was capable of, didn't fatally wound him. But the Kakuzu of that time was fighting for something. He had an ideology that he'd been trying to uphold. He believed in something so strongly that he chose to take on the most dangerous ninja in the world by himself for his village of Takigakure without a second thought. The Kakuzu of today fought for money, the only thing left that he could believe in. It was a hollow existence, but it was one that he had been good at. Even Akatsuki recruited him by promising him vast amounts of money, and he'd even taken on the title as the organization's treasurer. That's it. Kakuzu said as his shoulder fixed itself. He was prepared to remove his Akatsuki cloak to continue battling with the Sunin. It seems I really do have to go out of my way to show you just where you stand. Kakuzu. Hidan. The sound of a disembodied voice in his head prompted him to stop mid-action. He knew who that was, Leader Sama. Talk about terrible timing. And he couldn't reply, because unlike their all-powerful leader, neither of them had telekinetic capabilities, long-range or otherwise. You've taken enough time off to tend to your personal business. Now that Kisame has thoroughly recovered, it is time for everyone to get back to their assigned missions. There is work to be done, and there's trouble mounting on our plans. Report to a safe house and get ready for a meeting at once. Grr. Kakuzu seethed quietly while he heard an annoyed aman from Hidan, who jumped through the wall of flames separating his battlefield from his more maniacal partner. I take it your brains weren't scrambled enough to miss that message. Time to go. Hidan asked, patting out a flame on the sleeve of his cloak. PSSHT. Well, I guess I killed enough people already as it is. It'll suffice for Jashin-sama, I guess. Even though he really wanted to finish those Hyuga and Aburame brats, you didn't kill the old bat yet. What, is she immortal too? Not likely. Kakuzu said before he and Hidan used Shunshin to move a ways away from Tsunade. I'll be back, to collect my money. More important matters beckon at the moment. Clenching her fists, Tsunade thought to go after them, but decided against it. They weren't going off in the direction that she'd broken off from Naruto in, thus he wasn't the matter of whatever business they were talking about. Come to think of it, they probably didn't even know he was there if they were present solely due to Kakuzu's greed. Waiting for several moments until she was sure a roundabout attack wasn't coming, Tsunade called out over the crackle of the flames in the field, "Kids." Tsunade-sama. Good. They were all right. The bug kid being the one to answer so quickly signified that much. Are you unharmed? It'll take more than some ragdoll human to finish me off. Tsunade assured them. A part of her was greatly impressed by the fact that they hadn't been killed. If Hidan was half as dangerous as Kakuzu, a 2-on-1 fight against him still probably wouldn't have worked out in their favor. Come on. The last rendezvous point is the bounty station. Let's go. There was still work to be done. All of this was not about to be for nothing. The worst 10 hours that she'd had in quite a long while. Konohagaku no Sato, Konoha Cemetery. For Yakushi Kabuto it had been a hard night's work after he finished spying on Jiraiya and Danzo in the academy. There was one more thing he wanted to do before leaving. He'd wanted to do this for quite some time, but the moment he did so he knew his cover would be blown, whether it appeared that he'd gotten away clean or not. Sure, working in the hospital he'd gotten plenty of DNA samples from the shinobi that had come through, alive or dead, but for the most part they were usually nobodies. No, if he wanted the best material for the jutsu he was looking more into, he had to get it from the best place possible. Most of the most powerful shinobi of history were already dead and gone. There was no better place to retrieve substantial remains of powerful individuals. He had to depart soon though after covering his tracks. The sun was almost up and after this there would be no coming back. It was fortunate that the graveyard already sat at the outskirts of the village. He could make a quick departure and make tracks to the nearest border. Yakushi-san. Damn it. Turning around, quite a distance back, Kabuto turned to see Umino Iruka coming his way. The friendly schoolteacher with the scar across the bridge of his nose and the brown hair in the high ponytail. Double damn it. Pasting his best cluelessly pleasant smile on his face, Kabuto turned to greet the Chunin who seemed a bit confused at his presence in this environment. Good morning Iruka-sensei. What are you doing out here so early? My class is meant to clean and tend to the graves today. Iruka informed him, looking around subtly. What are you doing out here so early? What could he say? That he was out there to visit the graves of his former teammates before he had to take on a shift at the hospital? No. Iruka was astute enough to know the kind of shifts that a genin-level medicnin would be allowed to take. Even if he was 23 years old, he was still a genin, and he wasn't an exceptionally talented enough medicnin, as far as Konoha knew, for him to be allowed to ignore this. Thus was the curse of having a cover of a talentless ninja that allowed him to avoid scrutiny for as long as it did. He couldn't say he was out to visit the grave of a patient he'd gotten attached to that had died. Then there would be follow-up questions that he couldn't answer, that would lead him into a trap. I know what you've been doing here Yakushi-san. It's rather appalling. A hair-raising shiver went down Kabuto's spine at hearing the cold tone from the usually quite amicable man in front of him. It was a complete shift in demeanor from just a moment ago. You just arrived here as I was preparing to leave Iruka-sensei. I don't see what's so appalling about visiting a grave. How about robbing them? Without another word being said, Kabuto slipped a kunai into his hand and attacked Iruka who seemed to be prepared for the attack, defending himself with his own kunai. He's so out of practice his movements are dulled. Kabuto thought to himself with a smirk, I wonder how you even found me. I erected a barrier around the graveyard to let me know if anyone was going to step onto the premises while I was doing my work. I'm a sensor ninja. I could sense that you had a barrier up. Iruka said before Kabuto disarmed him, losing his own kunai as well in the process. At least they were on equal footing without any weaponry in hand. I don't understand why you would do something like this now of all times. Even as a genin you would have to know something about the spy threat. You know there won't be any leniency given to you once you're captured. Kabuto couldn't help but laugh out loud at that point. It was just too much. Iruka had him red-handed but wasn't even aware of just how serious the situation was. He wasn't just some depraved grave robber. Let me tell you something that's just between us, Iruka-sensei. The way he moves. Iruka thought to himself, preparing for a taijutsu battle until he noticed something that wasn't right. Something off-putting. That's not the way a genin moves. Any genin. Kabuto's body language wasn't that of a hack ninja. Iruka knew ninja body language. Even though he was just a chunin, he'd made enough genin out of academy students and seen enough chunin and above in his career to perceive that about the people that he saw, able to size them up moments after seeing them. 5 hand seals came from Kabuto with an ease that can only come from practice and an expertise that seemed inconsistent with what records there were on him. Iruka wouldn't claim to know Kabuto's entire career run down by heart, but he'd been in the most publicized chunin exam in history, and there had been some information about him that everyone had been privy to. For background, Chakra no Meso, Chakra scalpel, dot. Both of Kabuto's hands were bathed in visible blue chakra, the sign of a rather high-level medical jutsu. Was he actually going to fight with that? Who was this man? Just between you and I, Iruka-sensei. Kabuto said as he faced Iruka down, I'm the spy you've all been looking for. Before he could ask why he'd divulge such information without reason, Iruka felt a sharp pain in his heart from behind and turned his head to see Kabuto standing behind him. Guh. See clone jutsu. No. The Kabuto behind Iruka said as the one that had been in front of him collapsed lifelessly, a surgically altered corpse. But that's not important. You know why I would have told you something like this? Because you're going to die here. Because I want them to know that I was here. It'll be like a big calling card saying, Kabuto was here. Why? Iruka asked, feeling the damage to his spine to go along with his heart injury. He couldn't even move his arms. This was not good. You were a Konoha ninja. For years. I've been splitting my allegiance all over the place actually. Blame Shimura Danzo. Kabuto said in a stone-cold tone, he set the foundation to make me who I am. The roots if you will. With that, Kabuto removed his glowing blue hand from Iruka's back, removing the chakra scalpel and allowing the man to fall to the ground so that he could take his leave. What a shame. Oh well, what kind of spy let himself be known on the way out without leaving a few bodies in their wake? Now it was all a matter of getting to the border where he wouldn't be so easily pursued any further. He'd have a good 2 hours of a head start before anyone even probably figured out that he was the perpetrator for sure and sent a tracking squad after him. So there was no time to dawdle. Goodbye sensei. Orochimaru-sama is waiting on me to return. Kabuto said as he left the graveyard in a shunshin. And he did leave. He left a wide-eyed Iruka there on the ground, bleeding internally amongst the gravestones, breathing languidly because of what had happened to his lungs, unable to even move a muscle due to what Kabuto had done to his spine. Ugh. He couldn't move and there was too much fluid in his lungs for him to breathe. It was too early in the morning for anyone else other than him to be there because it was his job to be there. His eyes peered up at the sight of the sun slowly rising as his own was starting to set. There was one more thing he could do as he felt himself get cold and his chakra started draining to preserve his vital bodily functions, and it didn't require hand seals, but for it to be useful it would take a massive amount of chakra. When he first taught Naruto Chakra Hankyuti no Jutsu, Chakra Echolocation Jutsu, Iruka warned Naruto about putting too much chakra into the jutsu when he didn't need it. It was just something that had been a side effect of Naruto's massive reserves and lack of real experience controlling it. The thing about the jutsu was that if you put enough chakra into the sonar burst, others would be able to pinpoint your location as well from using the jutsu. That was normally a detriment to the jutsu, but in this case it would serve a positive purpose. Enough chakra for Iruka at this point to register enough of a pulse for others to feel it and find reason to investigate meant sacrificing the rest of his own dying reserves. But he was too far gone to be saved anyway if he didn't do it regardless. At least. Iruka thought to himself as he mustered what he had left in the chakra department, at least I can maybe get them a quicker lead on Kabuto. He couldn't leave them a message, so alerting them in advance was the best thing he could do. As the sun hung in the sky, Iruka figured that he could leave it in the hands of his village. Not to avenge him, but to keep whatever Kabuto had obtained from Konoha from harming other denizens of their home. Southern Hinokuni Bounty Station, daybreak. A by now healed Naruto moved the rest of the way at the head of the Team 10, traveling to the last rendezvous point for the entire Tsunade escort squad. Ino had done a good, quick job of fixing him up and repairing his skin for him, relatively quick as it only took 15 minutes, though she was still extremely unnerved by the fact that he'd done such a thing to himself. Either way, the mission was still on and they needed to keep going to get the obscenely high bounty off of Tsunade's head per the mission parameters. Not too much farther though, as there was a rather large, very conspicuous building sitting on the side of the road in the middle of nowhere. What's this place even supposed to be for? Ino asked as they caught sight of it and landed directly across the large dirt road in front of it. She was tired and dirty and desperately wished that they could go back to that awesome hotel from the night before so that she could be pampered. Guys? You were the Fire Daimyo's men, do you know? Naruto gave her an I don't know gesture, as he really only remembered things that he was going to be dispatched in order to handle personally. Shikamaru had an idea though. I'm pretty sure that this is supposed to be a traveler's rest stop, but no one comes here anymore. With the current influx of in-towns granting travelers a more comfortable place to rest for the night, and many more that allowed other amenities more lavish than that, overnight traveler lodgings that were free were starting to become obsolete. The building actually did look rather old though, giving Shikamaru's guess credence. Also giving him credence was the fact that Akamaru walked out of the front door carrying a lowly cursing and complaining Kiba on his back with blood coming down his legs. That place is fucking gross. Kiba said to himself and to a whining Akamaru, hidden behind a urinal in a dirty public bathroom. Really? Needless to say his senses had been assaulted. Whoa. Naruto said upon seeing Kiba's bleeding form on his trusty Ninken, what the hell happened to you? The skin on his legs happened to be all torn up, and he'd seemed to have lost quite a bit of blood, presumably having taken more than one blood pill to replenish it from the rate it seemed to be coming out of him. Akamaru's white fur was getting stained red. You know. Kiba said upon first realizing that Team 10 was there, anytime the resident medic nin on that squad wants to come over here and stop me from bleeding out, that'd be just great. Akamaru barked in agreement. Upon realizing that he was talking about her, Ino grumbled and quickly made her way over to her former academy classmate, not a medic nin. And she wasn't. She just knew a little bit for just in case situations. Close enough. Be easy woman. So what happened? Naruto asked as he jogged over to Kiba who was being set down on the ground to be healed. You just came out, alone. Shika and you both split up to join back with your right teams. What's up? Yeah, about that. They were fighting some Akatsuki guy with Tsunade when they told me to go ahead. Kiba had to say something else to keep Naruto from turning in the direction where he figured they'd be in and heading off that way. No, they're coming this way right now. I can smell them getting closer. What the hell were they doing here? Naruto exclaimed. They'd just gotten through dealing with Itachi and Kisame before taking this mission and two more came forward to take them on, man. When it rained it poured. That was all he could say. I hit one of those guys flush with the Tsuga and he got right back up like nothing happened. Kiba recanted, wincing as the green glow covered Ino's hands and went over his injured legs. They had some seriously strong chakra. And those guys are supposed to be after you. Did you get any names? Shikamaru asked. We've only got 2. There are supposed to be 9 in all. No. Kiba said with a shake of his head. Hinata and Shino sent me away so fast I wasn't even able to size up the whole situation before I left. Ino continued fixing Kiba's wounds with the mystical palm medical technique for a few minutes longer when the remainder of the squad that had seemingly joined up while on the run made their presences known. Team 7 and Team 8 landed, surrounding Tsunade who took note of Team 10 and Kiba with Akamaru. Oh. That's good. You're already here. Tsunade said as she walked over to the others. Everyone still have all of their fingers and toes. Well, someone didn't have their skin for a little while at one point. Ino chimed in, shooting a look at Naruto who just gave her a shrug for the Four Tails side effects, but other than that, yes. I guess we're all okay. Hearing that someone didn't have their skin for a while got Tsunade to instantly crane her head towards Naruto, who knew what was coming and put his hands up defensively. Before you say anything else, Tsunade-bachan, it was completely unavoidable. We didn't have the time for a fight without it. We had to catch up with you. And you had time to shorten your lifespan, burn off all of your skin, and tire yourself out. Apparently that was a bit of news to the vast majority of the squad that hadn't been close enough to feel Naruto's power surge or bear witness to what he'd done. You never look this haggard, brat. Naruto found that there wasn't much he could say to that other than the following: we still beat you here, didn't we? Tsunade just stared at him for several seconds before dismissing him. The only reason I don't flick you halfway down that road back to the capital is because I'm sure the Yamanaka girl wasted a lot of time and chakra fixing your broken down ass. Love you too. Sasuke crossed his arms over his chest and squinted at the sunlight hitting him in the eyes. What about the mission? This is the bounty station, so don't tell me all you guys have done is stay out here and fix Kiba. Asshole. Kiba said before pointing out a blood trail that led inside and back out to where he wound up laying down for Ino to heal him. By now Hinata was assisting as well. Shortly after seeing her teammate on the ground, I already went inside and back out. I thought your eyes were supposed to be good. Sasuke scoffed and turned away from the Inuzuka youngster while Sakura asked the question that everyone else there wanted to know: so what happened? Did you handle the bounty? Yes and no. Kiba said, looking away from everyone else while his healing continued. There were some things I could do, some things I couldn't do. It's complicated. Yes and no? What the hell did that mean? Uncomplicate it then. Shino insisted behind his shades. Growling at him momentarily, Kiba then decided to launch into explanation as Tsunade was now paying rapt attention to him. I couldn't take the bounty off per se. The guy said that he couldn't do that since he's just the payout. Cracking her knuckles with one hand, she slowly began stomping her way towards the bounty station. I already threatened him. You're not me, she said as she planned on busting down the damn walls until she found the guy in charge. You've got to find the guy that set the bounty if you want to do anything about it. Even if you kill the guy inside, another black market manager'll take his place. There were black market bounty stations all over the country. And whether they knew it or not, even if Tsunade remembered the town that had the banker that she'd borrowed from and didn't pay back, Kakuzu had quite successfully scared him deep into the boonies in order to hide. Bounties didn't really come off anyway. The person that commissioned it already put the money forward to be paid out. Team 10 knew a lot about this kind of topic because their sensei Asuma had a huge bounty on his own head that he loved bragging about, and Team 8 knew because they were a good tracking team and trackers were good at hunting runaways, nukenin, and bounty heads. So what do we do now? Naruto asked, scratching his head. We can't get it off of her without finding the guy that put it on her to begin with, and I really don't remember the guy, so I know she doesn't. She'd done the same thing to so many creditors over the years, so she wasn't going to remember one in particular. Shizuneneshin might, but I doubt even she would. Well, I did do something that'd help, Kiba said as he began to feel the relief from his injuries healing up. He still wondered how he got them, but he could find that out later. You're not gonna like it though, he said to Tsunade, because the only thing I could really do was change the bingo book entry to protect you some more. What? How? Needless to say, Kiba really wasn't excited about what he had to say next. Knowing what he was privy to about Tsunade, well, I kind of had to get the heat off of you somehow, so I used your name and ninja ID to have them update your profile rundown to align you back with Konoha. At least now that'll stop villages thinking they can recruit you. But now I can't leave Konoha whenever I want. Tsunade seethed, making it look like she wished to strangle the Dogatunshin where he laid. How he even got her ninja ID number was beyond her, but it was basically as good as making an official statement on her behalf to the world. Sarutobi-sensei's going to love that. Sorry. Kiba apologized, trying to protect himself as he scooted away from Tsunade and his own medical attention on the ground, eventually finding Naruto and Sasuke to use as a shield. I tried for 45 minutes and I couldn't think of anything else to salvage the mission with. Can you? Tsunade tried to come up with something and stopped and started several times, but nothing came out of her mouth. Eventually Naruto spoke up and chimered in, "Oh come on Ba-chan, you basically moved back into Konoha already, and you know you're still not gonna take missions anyway, so what's the problem? In response, all the Sunin did was buck threateningly in Naruto's general direction to send him taking off away from her and her rather volatile temper. Oh my! Hinata said as she was able to see how far and fast Naruto had gone in such a short time with the Byakugan. I didn't know Naruto-kun was so fast. He'd better be fast. Tsunade kept a deep frown on her face until she turned in the direction that she could see Naruto running down the road. Walking until she was at the front of the whole group, she actually let a smile onto her face now that no one could see, if only for a moment. Alright everyone, let's go home. Who knows how the place fell apart without you all there? She said sarcastically. She didn't know it at the time, and neither did any of the rest of them, but it really didn't turn out to be that sarcastic in the long run. Guardian Days 12. 2 years and 4 months after Shikamaru and Naruto's acceptance. This year's Chunin exam had taken place in Kumo-Gakure once again, another sign of Kumo's growing strength, and again the fire daimyo wanted to be in attendance for the festivities. Needless to say, the man got what he wanted, especially when it came to things like this. Once again all guardian hands were meant to be on deck, and indeed they were, but much like it did a year prior, something major happened to Naruto. In the course of the festivities, a few wagers were made, some between people with vastly differing luck, and that led to bets being made that could not be backed up. Tsunade and Jiraiya owed Naruto money, because apparently he was great at picking out dark horses for winning their way through rounds in the tournament. They paid him the only way they had to do so after they'd lost all of their gambling money to him and some of the other guardians at some point. At the close of the Chunin exams, Naruto was told by Jiraiya who his father was. Talk about a culture shift. He kind of shut down after that, and wasn't rightfully fit to carry on with the important guard duty for the long trip back to the capital of Hinokuni if he couldn't get his head straight by the time they were slated to leave the next day. Naruto had left Kumo for a bit of air. A bit of air must have meant leaving and heading out roughly 20 to 30 miles outside of the village on a walkabout, because that was what he did. It didn't take Shikamaru that long to find him, although the latter wasn't pleased to do so. Kaminari no Kuni had a lot of mountain ranges, and the only thing more annoying for a guy like Shikamaru than having to walk was having to walk around in a mountainous place. You gonna go back yet? Shikamaru asked as he walked with Naruto through some gigantic watery valley covered in clouds and fog. Seriously, if it's walking around you want to do, wait for tomorrow. You can do all of the walking you want during the escort back. Can't smoke indoors in Kumo, you know. Naruto said with a cigarette in his mouth that was more ash than actual cigarette at this point. The sound of a waterfall filled his ears and he turned in the direction that they heard it from. Hold on 1 second. Naruto looked down at his hands before charging off in the direction of the waterfall, shouting at the top of his lungs. Shikamaru flinched and cringed when he saw Naruto slam his hands into the waterfall and cut a split straight up the middle that destroyed the top of the fall. Well, someone finished their wind manipulation training, didn't they? The perturbed blonde landed back at Shikamaru's side. His cigarette remains now non-existent due to the downward force of the waterfall he'd just split. Sorry about that, Shika. You were saying. You get that out of your system? You feel better? Shikamaru asked before pointing in the general direction of Kumo. Can we go back now? I don't know what's wrong with you. I just found out my old man is the Yondaime Hokage. That's awesome. I know. That's so troublesome. I know. Are you mad about it? Not mad. Emotionally distressed. Dude, no. So he knew who both of his parents were by now. It had to be a shock to the system for sure though. And Shikamaru couldn't relate, so he had absolutely nothing to contribute to help out at all other than just being there. Want to destroy some more stuff before we go back? Shikamaru offered. Looking around and finding that there was a lot of barren rock and absolutely nothing else around them, it kind of set Naruto's mind right there. Yeah, just a little bit more. There had been a plan to form a Rasengan, and from there, Shikamaru didn't know what Naruto was going to do other than tear up what he had the energy to, but they were quite rudely interrupted before that could happen. Yeah. Both young guardians were forced away from each other by a large figure crashing down into the water between where they had been standing just moments before. Whether it was an attack or a falling chunk of mountain they didn't know, but both were prepared as if it were an attack. This was what they got for leaving the party, it seemed. Shikamaru blamed Naruto, but now was not the time for that. As everything around them calmed, they could easily tell that it was a person that had taken a huge swan dive down on top of them. A very muscular, dark-skinned man with odd-patterned white hair, a goatee, a white kumo headband, and small sunglasses with a bull's horn tattoo on his cheek. He wore Kumo's white one-shoulder flak jacket with no shirt underneath, a red rope around his waist, white and red hand and shin guards, 7 swords on his back, and a tattoo with the kanji for iron on his right shoulder. Now. The burly man said, gesturing his arms flamboyantly, "What you two doing on my training ground?" Despite being separated, Naruto and Shikamaru both looked at each other confusedly. Tactful as ever, Naruto spoke up first, who the hell are you?" "Stay smooth Naruto, budding Jinchuriki extraordinaire. You don't know Killer Bee fool?" The large Kumo ninja asked, seemingly incredulously at the ignorance of the 2 foreign shinobi, about to get an education on Kumo's rules. Seriously, who didn't know who he was? He was a hero. A superstar. Listen and learn before you get burned. Once again, both younger men were at a loss for words. Is he saying he wants to fight with us? Shikamaru asked with a raised eyebrow. I can't tell. I don't know. Naruto replied, wondering if he should pull his machete or if that would be a horrible idea or not. You're the smart one. And why the fuck does he keep rhyming? Stop rhyming. He then blinked and amended his statement, actually I don't mind the rhyming, just rhyme better. The abnormal Killer Bee responded to Naruto's shout with a middle finger sent his way. Jinchuriki-sama doesn't have to take that from you, you're just a snot-nosed baby that's tone deaf too. You're damn right I don't have to take this from you. Naruto, I think he's talking about himself. That would mean he's a Jinchuriki shika. I am a Jinchuriki ya brat. The Jinchuriki is a matter of fact. Killer Bee stated, throwing his hand into the air with his index and pinky finger forming a pair of horns in the sky. Hua. It's true boys and it ain't trite, the great 8 tails will end your life. 8 tails. Naruto smacked his lips in thought before asking the next most important question that came to mind, and how much can you actually control? Please say 3 tails or less. For the love of his own bravado please say 3 tails or less. Ha. Been training since I was small, so the great Killer Bee can control it all. All 8 tails. Concern over his parents was the last thing Naruto was really worried about at the moment. He could dwell on that later. Right then he and Shikamaru had to worry about how to get themselves out of trouble for apparently trespassing on the training grounds of the perfect Jinchuriki, because they weren't going to even try and fight him. Even if they survived a fight with him they weren't going to win it, and it would have started an international incident. But running away didn't make them any less manly, did it? Hopefully they never did anything to piss that person off in the future. Chapter 57, Time Teaches Harshly. The door to Naruto's apartment opened as the grimly black-clad blonde walked in and shut the door behind him. Moving to the first chair in the dwelling he could reach, he sat down and put his hands over his eyes, elbows on his knees. Upon returning to Konoha, the first news he was hit with was extremely dark. Umino Iruka, the man that had been his first sensei and given him his foundations as a ninja, the man that had taught him the sensor technique Shakura Hankyuti to no Jutsu, Chakra Echolocation Jutsu, and the useful trap barrier ninjutsu Fubaku Hujin, sealed bomb square release, he was now gone. There was good news that the spy that had been plaguing Konoha intelligence for years had been finally exposed as Yakushi Kabuto. But that news was extremely bittersweet, as it was only learned after he was already gone, having taken Iruka's life before leaving. That little portion of intel hit some of Naruto's other comrades harder than it did him. He didn't know Kabuto that well, but Kabuto had hung around Team 7 quite extensively over the years. He'd taught Sakura and Ino Shaozen Jutsu, mystical palm jutsu, he'd treated them when they went to the hospital for minor injuries, he'd worked under them on routine missions when they were gaining experience as Chunin. Chuji, Sasuke, Sakura, and Ino all felt betrayed. They'd been the closest to Kabuto. Neji, Lee, and Tenten kept kicking themselves because they'd missed it. It had gone right over their heads as they'd been on the task force to locate the spy. Kiba couldn't believe that his instincts hadn't tipped him off. With Shino it was hard to tell what he was thinking about it all. Hinata had been moved to tears to have to say goodbye to their sensei in the manner that it occurred. Naruto just felt pissed. Going to the funeral and seeing all of his academy classmates and many others that had been close to Iruka over the years mourning just pissed him off more. He didn't cry. He couldn't. Not because it wasn't cool, or because he didn't feel sorrow, but because he was seeing so much red for the entire service that any tear of sadness that would have come to his eye would have evaporated before it rolled down his cheeks. It was all the more terrible because they knew who'd killed him. They knew him in what they thought was personal manner. They befriended that bastard. They made him one of them after the Chunin exam in Tetsu no Kuni. It didn't matter to them that he was a low-level genin, or that he was 8 years their senior. His team had been slaughtered by Gaara during the competition and he'd been left alone. Nobody else cared after the initial pity wore off. No one in his academy grad class gave a damn. No one did except for the 12 of them, and it was more than likely a part of his ruse the entire time. Don't look back in anger, boy. Naruto could hear Jiraya's voice in his head even right then. The man would oftentimes try to talk him down whenever he saw Naruto getting angry about something. Hate is a cycle, Naruto. Someone wrongs you, so you do the same to them in return. Even if you kill them, that person will have someone that will feel you wronged them by taking the life that you took. Where will it end? He heard it off and on for 3 years while Jiraiya taught him. Jiraya's words had a point. He had plenty of reason behind them, but adhering to them was something else altogether. He couldn't do it, Jiraiya couldn't do it, no one he knew that was a ninja could do it. He had hate in him. Hell, he had a big old fox comprised mostly of hate sitting right in his belly. Did he have the propensity to forgive to that extent though? To forgive someone like Kabuto? If he saw Kabuto in the desert, dying of thirst, alone, with no visible method of survival available, and he asked Naruto for one drink of water, would he be able to give it to him? Would he keep walking on without stopping, or would he stop, stand, and wait for Kabuto to die off so that he could see it in person before moving along? And Naruto couldn't answer that question. Hell, saving him wasn't even an option in that scenario when Naruto first thought of it. His head lifted up when he heard a quiet knock at his front door and found Ino standing there dressed back in normal clothes. Hey there, stranger. Holding a melancholy smile on her face as she looked over and down at the seated Naruto, I figured you would have changed by now. The funeral ended 3 hours ago, Goldie. I just got back. I stayed there for a while after, at his grave. Went to see Mom and Dad for a bit too, talked to them. Naruto said, looking up at her as she took her sandals off at the door and headed on in, you're never gonna give that key to this place back, are you? He didn't really want her to give the key back. He was just busting her chops a bit, or trying to at least. She just shook her head and walked over to him to set a hand on his shoulder. How are you feeling? You were closer to Iruka-sensei than any of us, so. You don't want to hear how I'm feeling. Naruto said in return. Seriously, he still held the man in high esteem. When he first came back, one of the earliest things he did was seek out Iruka to show off how much he'd improved on the first personal jutsu the man taught him, and now as far as he knew he was the only one left that knew how to perform the damn thing. Hands on her hips, Ino just kept looking him over before she started tugging at him to get out of the chair, much to his confusion. Come on, up. Go get changed, you're coming to spend some time with everyone else today. You're not staying by yourself like this. It's not good for you. It caught Naruto by surprise at first, but to his nature he had to act the ass about something like this just to be a bother. Digging his heels in, he significantly slowed Ino's pushing of him to his room. Oi, are you asking me or telling me? Telling you, obviously. Sometimes you're not smart enough to make your own choices, because if I hadn't shown up you'd have sat here by yourself for 3 days straight. Wait, no, I freaking wouldn't have. He wasn't some charity case that had to get his ass kicked out of funks when he was in them. And with that being added on to the fact that he hated being told what to do in any and all circumstances, it didn't make him very cooperative. Yes, you would have. You do the same thing whenever you're super sad or really put off about something. Ino argued in return, it doesn't happen very often with you, but when you sulk hard. Naruto harumphed as they eventually did make it to his room, and Ino gave him one last shove past the door frames. So damn bossy. Naruto grumbled, shirking off his black formal wear shirts before realizing that Ino was still standing there with her arms expectantly crossed. Are you gonna ogle me while I change, Miss Bossy? You don't seem that bothered by it, Sergio. Freezing just as he got his shirt off, Naruto slowly turned back around to a grinning Ino. I know what I want for my birthday. She said in a sing-song voice before putting her hands on her hips. You thought Shino could keep a secret like that from me? Yeah, I did. Why? It's not national security. He's Shino. Naruto's continued tirade about how someone like Shino seemed like they'd never talk about any secret that they found out ever was cut off when Ino stepped forward and put a hand on his cheek. Ah, what? What did I do? You see. Ino said, smiling up at him while rubbing his whisker marks, that's why I want you to hang out with the rest of us on a day like today. Even if it was just for a little bit, I made you think about something else, didn't I? She planted a kiss on his cheek and backed off out of the room, shutting the door upon departing. Now be good and get dressed. Naruto just stared at the shut door before he finally blinked and snapped back to normal. This time he did indeed choose to do what was requested of him without a fuss, throwing on his normal clothes and equipment to go out. Grieving with people would be more helpful than doing it alone, especially since he wasn't much of a drinker, which was the method of solo grieving that most self-destructive people took. Did she just mind screw him? Nah. Nothing chakra-related even happened. They just talked, and she was persuasive, and soft, and smelled really good. Kami, that scent lingered. Definitely not a mindfuck though. He felt fine. I don't need chakra to mess with your mind, Goldie-kun. Get out of my head, woman. A few days later, Hyuga clan compound. Hanabi was a Hyuga through and through. Quiet, respectful, polite, yet rather prideful in her status as a clan head's child and her skills, making her at times a bit haughty. She was a fierce top genin of Konohagaku no Sato, and a lethal kunoichi. The thing about her was that when she liked someone it was extremely easy for her to open up to them. And when it was around someone she really liked, especially back when she was a little girl, she might as well have been 7 or 8 years old again right then and there. Which was why a beaming Hanabi sat casually in the lap of Naruto, who was visiting his Hyuga clan friends on their home property. Her beloved Naruto Asuma didn't drop by the rigidly stuffy Hyuga clan premises often since returning to the village, but he had on this day to visit her and his friends, including her cousin and her sister. Neji sat calmly by Naruto on a slight hillside slope that rested right by a gently moving stream, but other than biting a nervous hello, Hinata then became conspicuous by her absence. She greeted him well enough, but then excused herself. Her face had progressively been getting redder and redder as they conversed, and Neji and Hanabi had given her rather pitying looks as she departed, so she might have had allergies to whatever was down by the riverside. The Jonin of the younger Hyuga members had his eyes closed as he patiently listened to the sound of the running water. You seem very troubled, Naruto. He said, though he could figure why. It got to him as well. Even though Iruka hadn't been his sensei in the academy, he was still a Konoha ninja and it had been part of his job to catch the spy when this incident occurred. I am sorry for what it's worth. You didn't do anything wrong, Neji. Naruto insisted with a slight smile, as much of one as he could muster given the topic material anyway. It wasn't just you or Lee or Tenten. It was all of us. We all knew who Kabuto was, or we thought we did anyway. Neji nodded, but still didn't like it. Either way, Naruto looked down at the smaller girl in his lap and got her attention. How are you holding up since the funeral, little firecracker? Hanabi squirmed uncomfortably at the mention of the most recent funeral that she had been present for. She had been in Iruka's class for the previous school term before she'd graduated and become a genin. I've been training Naruto Asuma. I still have to make a strong showing at the Chunin exams even though I'm a rookie. Naruto did. Hell, Hinata had made it to the finals. Neji had as well and had even dominated an entire round of the proceedings before being forced to bow out in the quarter-finals. Maybe being put in a life-threatening situation or several would be just what she needed to cheer up. That or getting the chance to beat Konobaka into the dirt. Make it to the finals and I'll show you something good in the month you'll have to train for them. Naruto bribed her, developing a big grin when he saw her eyes go wide. The Chiba Hyuga planted a big kiss on his cheek and ran off to go train just in case she wasn't quite ready and needed a bit more before the time for the exams came. Anything from Naruto would have to be good. Hayashi-sama would probably thank you for motivating her. Neji said with a smile as he could see Hanabi still running off to find a place to get to work with his Byakugan, but I thought you were a mentor to the boy that happens to be her rival. I kind of am. Naruto replied, lying back on the grass to stare up at the sky. I made the same deal with Kano Amaru. It cheered him up too after all of the stuff that happened around here. Neji nodded before his smile turned into a smirk. If they both make it to the finals, you are going to try to teach them the same jutsu, aren't you? Okami, the thing about it is that I was actually thinking about doing that. Naruto admitted with a chuckle, it'd be amazing. This was good. He needed a laugh nowadays. First with the mission to Mizu no Kuni where they managed to lose the Jinchuriki Yukimaru, and then on the last mission with Tsunade which was a success for the most part, but upon returning they were met with quite a bit of tragedy. Not quite the glorious return home to past normalcy that Naruto had expected and dreamt of while toiling away as a guardian ninja, just waiting for that chance to come back home and show everyone what he was made of. Hey Neji. Naruto started to say, do you ever wonder at what point you've got to stop living up here, and start living down here? He expressed this physically by moving his hand from an elevated position in the air to a significantly lower one. In return, Neji just gave him the driest look he could with his featureless eyes. Naruto, neither of us have had an actual day off in weeks until now, and your first mentor was just killed by a spy that I was responsible for finding. Would you mind saving the introspective comments for another time? You're not good at them. What say you, Hinata-sama? He asked, raising his voice at the end to make sure he was heard. Eep. Yeah, seriously. Naruto said, turning in the direction that he knew she was hiding in just at the top of the grassy slope. I can sense stuff, remember? I know you're there, Hinata. Come on over already. Come on. Hinata poked her head up from the crest of the little hill and laughed a bit nervously, forgetting that Naruto was technically a sensor ninja to an extent before walking down and sitting down a little bit higher than Naruto and Neji in the grass. Hello Naruto-kun. I didn't mean to make it look like I was avoiding you, I just didn't know what to say when I saw you. Meh, you don't have to say anything. Naruto insisted as he lay back in the grass and faced the sky. I know you're a good girl, and it'd probably be uncomfortable to try and act like what happened a while ago didn't happen. Thanks for taking on the Akatsuki the way you did too. Neji wasn't very happy with Naruto about that one, until it was explained that it was totally unavoidable. On the way back, Naruto had explained it to anyone that hadn't already known yet amongst his crew of friends that he was the container of the Kyuubi. The only ones that hadn't known were Hinata, Sakura, and Shino, and two of them had basically deduced that there was something strange about Naruto's chakra ever since the Chunin exams. You know? Naruto commented idly, a small smile growing on his face. I had a joke with Iruka-sensei. I told him that when I became Hokage I had a good way to help lower the pressure with some students. I was gonna give him my progress report and he was going to read it to the kids, and then when they started making fun of it and asking whose it was I was gonna show up and scare the hell out of them. He used to drop by for a few minutes and just chat and joke around with Iruka. He had tons of stupid little anecdotes like that about how what he was going to do. He would do this and that when he got promoted, and he would do this and that with the academy when he finally became Hokage. It was now that he realized that he had sorely taken for granted the fact that he always just assumed that Iruka would be around to see these things happen. He'd taken for granted the people around him, as if they would always be there. His thoughts were interrupted when he found a delicate hand resting itself on his shoulder. A comforting gesture, and it came from Hinata of all people. When Naruto turned to look over at her he saw that her face was as red as a cherry, but she still managed a legitimate if not very hard to maintain smile. Thanks a lot. Naruto said earnestly, grabbing her hand and giving it several pats. You're a really good girl, you know. She fell backwards into the grass and Naruto just shrugged before returning to his own idle thoughts. Yeah, that's the spirit. Relax. The poor thing's face was awfully red. She was so nice for hanging out with him and Neji even though she was allergic to whatever was around there making her face that color to begin with. Neji just shook his head and followed everyone else's lead in laying back on the grass and staring up at the sky as the gathering lapsed into silence. I don't see what Shikamaru sees in this. The Hyuga genius commented. Yeah, I know. This is so boring. Naruto said in agreement before bringing up an option, want a spar or something? Naruto, I'm on a team with Might Guy and Rock Lee. Don't you think I get enough of that already? Yeah, but I haven't fought you in 3 years. Come on, don't you want a rematch? Not today. Your cousin is totally adorable, by the way. Yes, I guess Hanabi-sama is rather dash dot. No, I meant Hinata this time. Look at her. Naruto said, not even needing to direct his attention over to Neji to tell that he'd turned his head in his direction so fast that his neck was probably sore. I could go over there and cuddle up with her right now. To his credit, Neji did not allow the veins around his eyes to bulge and place the Byakugan into use. That genius label might have applied to the battlefield more than anything else, but he wasn't a slouch anywhere else. You're trying to goad me into a fight, aren't you? Is it working? Kumo Gakure no Sato, Raikage's office. Samui and Karui had expected the furniture to fly after they made it back to Kumo and reported not only the failure in their mission to bring Tsunade back to the village with them, but of the death to both Omoi and Darui. It had been a sobering trip back for the two women. Even with Samui's injured leg that Ino had treated enough to send her off to the next stop, the pain didn't matter much to her. She was mostly numb in mind and body except for when she thought about the scroll that contained the bodies of her longtime teammate and their team leader, who was one of the most important men in Kumo. Well, had been one of the most important men in Kumo. But once they'd actually gotten to the Raikage and delivered to him the news, and the scroll that neither of them had tried to open since Samui had watched Ino seal it away while in Karui's body, the man took the news with an unnerving silence. Simply sat at his desk, hands clasped together in front of his mouth pensively as he stared down at the scroll lying there on the surface before him. He had been that way for nearly an hour, and neither of the girls, nor the Raikage's lovely assistant Mabi, had said a word. How did they die? I asked. His voice boomed even though it was the quietest any of them could remember hearing him speak before. What killed them? From their report, the mission had been a complete mess that had devolved into a free-for-all involving more than one village. Hell, the only major village that didn't get involved in this was Kirigakure, but that was probably because Konoha and Kiri were getting along on increasingly better terms recently for some reason. It was this guy from Konoha. Uzumaki Naruto. Karui answered first, fists shaking at her side as she remembered seeing him polish off Omoi. He already had Omoi beat, but then he shot Omoi with some ash grenade thing that blew him out of the water before he could get himself together. She neglected to mention that Naruto had been provoked into retaliation by Darui's attack against a person that wasn't even involved in the direct conflict at hand between them. Was it tactically a good move for him to take a shot at Ino? Of course it was. She wouldn't have seen it coming. It would have freed up Samui and Karui to come and help him with a more difficult opponent, and would have given them a 3 or 4-on-1 advantage. Still though, that all mattered if he'd hit her, and the third guy that could control his shadow was sweet at picking his spot when he did to step in because he saved her from that fate. Thus the only thing he did was piss off Naruto, who responded in kind by attacking their vulnerable teammate. Jinchuriki were kind of a nasty lot for the most part, notorious for rather violent outbursts, and that manifested itself during the mission in the straightforward, brutal way that Naruto disposed of Darui and Omoi. His temper had clearly been lost. Darui was killed by the most powerful wind ninjutsu I think I've ever seen. Samui said as she had been the only one between herself and Karui that saw the end come for Darui. It stripped a 20-foot trench into the ground at least a quarter of a mile away. I scoffed in return, that's all. It was more than Darui could muster, but Darui had never been a battlefield warping kind of ninjutsu specialist. He was finesse and speed, winning battles with versatility. From the sounds of things, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki just chose to flat out overpower him, and even that wasn't a small feat as Darui still had more raw power in his techniques than most Kumo ninja could muster. There was no way he was going to make his right-hand man anything other than someone that was significantly heavy-handed in how they attacked. With Darui's Rantan and Black Lightning, there shouldn't have been anyone in Kumo other than Yujito, Killer Bee, and himself that could take Darui out and be able to walk away with any kind of ease afterwards. But that didn't take into account fighting the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. I had seen Naruto before. He'd seen him several times. He was rather underwhelming and not very impressive for all of the potential that he had. But then again, he'd been a young teenager, so what could he really have been expecting? Last time he'd seen him, Naruto had been one of the guardian ninja meant to protect the daimyo during Kumo's last Chunin exam that they had hosted, and the last he'd heard of him during that event was that he and the Nara kid that seemed to be joined to his hip had fled like rabid dogs back into the village gates after taking some kind of walk to the Valley of Clouds and Lightning, Killer Bee's training ground. He could easily guess why they'd been sprinting back as fast as they could when he knew that the site was Killer Bee's training ground of choice. He'd made a point to get his share of laughs out of the Kyubijin Churuki running away from the Hachibijin Churuki when he'd been behind closed doors and could do so freely. It wasn't very funny now. He vengefully wished that the little punks had been dumb enough to start a fight with Killer Bee that day so that they'd have been killed or scarred, mentally or physically, for life. None of this would have happened if they had been. And now the yellow-haired loudmouth was strong enough to kill Darui and Omoi by himself in battle. The thought caused a quick burst of lightning chakra to layer A's body for a split second, getting the others in the room to flinch involuntarily. "What do we do now, Raikage-sama?" Mabi asked. She was a pretty, dark-skinned woman with green eyes and light gray hair done professionally in a bun, two bangs framing the sides of her face, and wore a very professional high-collared dress shirt and skirt. "What we do is refrain from letting this slip to Killer Bee until I can call him here and tell him myself," I ordered, trying to run damage control. Times when he was the most even-tempered person in the room were few and far between, but he would definitely take the news of Darui and Amwa's demise better than his little brother would. Killer Bee was unpredictable. But the one thing you could always count on was thinking of the worst possible option that he could take in any given situation, and then multiply it by 5. That was to be the expected response from the guardian of Kumogakuer when it came to anything that could rile him up. Which was why he felt a pending sense of dread when he saw the pensive looks on the faces of Karui and even Samui. "We ran into B-sensei on the way to the tower," Karui said guardedly, bracing herself for A's anger. "He already knows. And he was on the way to the Valley of Clouds and Lightning when he left." Samui added to try and give her lone remaining teammate a bit of backup in explaining things to their leader, "But he's never to leave the village, Raikage-sama." "Do you really think he would?" To his credit, A did not fly off of the handle immediately. He simply took a deep breath and heaved a sigh before his massive hands took hold of his desk from the underside. With no movement more complex than standing, A flung the desk through the nearest wall with a loud bellowing yell that could be heard from end to end in the village. "God damn it!" Meanwhile, Konohagakuer no Sato. When you had a weakness, you had to work to make it as unnoticeable as possible. It wasn't Naruto's favorite way to train, but when everyone kept making fun of you for having a glaring Achilles heel in regards to genjutsu and genjutsu defense, you had to do something to remedy that. Sasuke wasn't one to help with that, even though his optically activated genjutsu was the kind that he was most afraid of facing. See, Itachi. It was one definite advantage he had over Naruto before they would have their inevitable pissing contest of a rematch, and he wanted to keep that edge. Naruto couldn't blame him really. Sakura wouldn't do for this kind of thing. She was better than Sasuke at genjutsu, true, but most of her genjutsu required a trigger of some sort, and Naruto already knew how to deal with that. He wasn't so terribly hopeless at genjutsu. It was just that the only person he'd fought that used it extensively just so happened to be the genjutsu boogeyman. Luckily, he did have someone to go to that had probably forgotten more about genjutsu than he'd probably ever learn. "I've never been to Kurenye-sensei's place before," Naruto remarked, hands up behind his neck as he allowed Ino to lead the way and show him where to go. "I thought that she lived in an actual house or something, not an apartment, and I learned something new from Hinata, so I owe her one." "You didn't know where Kurenye-sensei lived because you were so scared of her you didn't bother to find out," Ino pointed out, bumping Naruto with her hip as they came up on an apartment complex. "Luckily, I know where everybody lives, because it was my job to know everything about everybody all the time. Why didn't you tell me then when I asked? Is it so wrong to ask for a favor for things? I asked for an address. Payment is usually required for goods or services rendered, Goldie-kun." Shikamaru kind of got tired of hearing the ongoing spiel and rolled his eyes. "If you knew everything about everybody like you said, you'd know that while we were gone Naruto got a fee and dash dot. Cue a quick grab around the waist from a chain before Shikamaru found himself flung up onto the second level of the apartment by Naruto. He expected something like that though, so Shikamaru's feet planted themselves on the railing, safely getting him up to the next floor. "Hey, thanks Naruto." Shikamaru said with an infuriatingly calm smile for just getting thrown 20 yards across and at least 15 feet into the air by a chain that had come out of his friend's arm. I didn't even have to take those troublesome stairs. Ino just stared up at Shikamaru wondering what the hell had just happened while Naruto gave the lazy genius a death stare of warning, mouthing, "If you tell her about that I'll dash dot." Complete with dragging his thumb across his throat slowly and pointing at him for emphasis. Either way, the moment died down and all three members of Team 10 found themselves up in front of the door that was meant to be Kurenye's. A few knocks on the door and they received no answer. Which was annoying since Team 8 apparently didn't have practice today, nor a mission, and even if they did have one, Kurenai hadn't been on a mission in a month or so. Maybe she's out. Ino wondered, flipping back her ponytail as they continued to stand outside. Goldie. On it. Naruto drew a lockpick set from his supplies and got to work on the door before Ino snapped his goggles on his forehead. Ow. What? I meant sense inside for her, not break into her place. Ino complained. Breaking into the homes of ninjas traditionally wasn't the best idea. Hey. Naruto replied with a sharp look her way, sensing into people's houses is rude. That's like unwritten censor rule number 2. Why do you think Hyugas don't turn their Byakugan on every 2 minutes? What's the first rule then? Shikamaru asked. I don't know, they're not written down, remember. The three-way argument would have continued, but a series of hard bumps from inside caught their attention. Remembering the events of the past few weeks that had not endeared Naruto to be very trustworthy of the safety of his loved ones inside of the village, he quickly undid the lock, no one dissuading him to do so, before all of them sprang into the house silently. The living room was a mess, and all three spread out to search for danger or an attack. Ino headed for the kitchen, Shikamaru watched the door at the ready with his shadow jutsu, and Naruto took his machete and his ability to use clones into the back where the rooms were. He could sense life in one of the rooms just around the corner and positioned himself in a place to retaliate. He then dropped his jaw and then his machete on the floor with a clang, because he'd found Kurenai. She had been with Asuma, without clothes, doing adult things. Naruto, what are you doing here? Naruto, get the fuck out of Kurenye's apartment. What Naruto had just seen could never be unseen. 10 minutes later. After coming across Asuma and Kurenai in the midst of copulation, Naruto slowly exited the back and went back into the living room to sit down, looking pale and lifeless with a haunted look in his eyes. Shikamaru's face had been red and even Ino had slowly walked back into the living room, guessing what must have happened from the sounds of things and the hushed tones coming from the back even then. The teenage team of Chunin just sat there like scolded children in silence until Asuma walked out from the back in the black pants of his usual uniform, looking rather displeased at the lot of them, and the fact that he couldn't smoke while he was inside of his girlfriend's place. He tried to be cool about it though. I figured that if this was going to happen it would have happened back when you were 12 or something. You see, at least then I'd have had some remorse for you seeing that. Asuma explained as he stood in front of the trio, you're 16 going on 17 now, and that ship has sailed. What the hell did you break into Kurenye's apartment for? Loud bumps. Naruto said, not willing to piss off his Jonin mentor any further by beating around the bush. We were outside, it sounded like something was happening inside. And with the way that Iruka had been killed less than a week ago by the traitorous Kabuto, it stuck in Naruto's craw. We came in. Knock next time. We did knock. Ino defended in an embarrassed huff, loud. Maybe if you weren't making that headboard bang against the wall so hard that we thought a fight was going on in here you would have heard it. And why's the living room trashed? Because this is where we started, but that's not the point. Asuma hurriedly dismissed, ignoring the suspicious glance that Naruto, Shikamaru, and Ino gave the couch they were sitting on. What do you want? Naruto sucks at genjutsu, Kurenai doesn't suck at genjutsu. He wants to pick her brain for a bit. Shikamaru summed up their reason for being there in the most basic terms he could. Naruto, is this worse than the time at the capital where you caught Jiraiya in your room with those 3 dash? No, that one was way worse. Naruto interjected before Shikamaru could finish that statement. It was my bed and we just got back from a mission. But at least Tsunade Bachin beat his ass after she found out about it. That and aforementioned incident aside, Naruto had always wanted to see Kurenye-sensei naked anyway, and she'd been on top when he walked in, so that made it more tolerable. There was something off though. Why did I sense 3 chakra sources from outside though? Ino's eyes widened and Shikamaru's nose began to bleed a bit at the question until Naruto cleared it up after seeing them. No. Not that, there were only 2 people in there. Geez, you guys are messed up. Kurenai walked into the room at the point, wearing a clean robe that she was able to find after cleaning up from the extracurricular activities of her and Asuma. Upon hearing what Naruto had said, she walked over to Asuma and let him wrap an arm around her waist. I didn't think your sensor jutsu was that strong, Naruto. Well yeah. Naruto said, smiling at remembering Iruka teaching him the jutsu. Iruka-sensei said I'm better at it than he is. I can sense through walls if I put enough chakra into it. It still hurt a bit to talk about Iruka, but he could still swell with pride when it came to his first teacher and what he learned from him. Bragging made him feel much better about bringing him up, even in passing like this. People too apparently. Huh. People too. Kurenai repeated with a motherly smile, because you sensed through me, or inside of me actually. She placed a hand on her stomach and everyone got the reference, mostly because Asuma was grinning like an idiot until Kurenai elbowed him. Rubbing the sore spot where he'd been hit, Asuma couldn't lose his grin though. So kids, questions? Concerns? How far along is she for Goldie-kun to sense a baby? Ino asked, bewildered at the news. She knew that Asuma and Kurenai hooked up, but she didn't know that it was that serious between them. This is just, wow. 2.5 months. Kurenai answered, figuring that now was as good a time as any for people to find out about her pregnancy. She wouldn't be able to hide it for that much longer anyway. Shikamaru just held up a finger and alternated pointing at the 2 of them before giving up on coming up with anything snarky to say. What was there? Naruto just got up and shook Asuma's hand with a blank expression on his face before grabbing Kurenai and giving the surprised older lady a big hug. I'm gonna be somebody's godfather. Sweet. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What the hell makes you think you're going to be my kid's godfather? Asuma asked, amused at Naruto's reaction. Who else would be better to look out for your kid than a badass Jinchuriki? Naruto asked before listing off other reason why he'd be great for it on his fingers. Kids love me. I spent the last 3 years as a bodyguard for the most trouble-prone noble ever. The floors of my apartment smell of rich mahogany, and aside from that, who else got lined up for the job? Dead silence. The to-be parents really hadn't thought that far ahead. Their Jonin acquaintances weren't really the best choices for such a thing, for various reasons. Kakashi, Guy, Anko, take your pick. All of them had something seriously wrong with them. But their students weren't nearly as screwed up as the full-grown adults were. At least not yet. But wait. Naruto and Shikamaru had just come back from the Guardian Ninja. Damn it. They were already too far gone to salvage sanity-wise. Naruto definitely was. He should know. But in a pinch, if he had to choose. Asuma stared at Naruto before turning to Shikamaru. Shika. Godfather. How about it? Lesser of 2 evils. What? Shikamaru reacted immediately. He didn't want anything to do with kids right now. That was bad news for a guy like him. Responsibility? Ick, hell no. Let Naruto do it. He wants to do it. I want to do it so bad. Naruto confirmed, looking eager to have the ceremonial title bestowed upon him. Do I get a hat like if I become Hokage, or a sash like my guardian one? Or maybe being godfather is how Ero-sensei got his kick-ass horned headband. Is that thing ceremonial? Because it damn sure ain't practical and he never told me how he got it. If it was for being your godfather, why would it say oil on it, dumbass? Shut the fuck up if you don't have a theory, Shika. You don't know how he got it either. And these were the 2 front-running candidates that would take care of Asuma and Kurenai's unborn child in case something bad happened to the 2 of them. God help them. Ino raised her hand idly as if she were in school. I call godmother. She said with a brilliant smile. Kurenai just gave Team 10 a strange look while Asuma palmed his forehead hard. You can't call godparent status Ino. It doesn't work like that. We have to pick you and then you can accept if you want. Oh. The blonde Yamanaka said in understanding before blinking several times in thought. Well, in that case I'm with Goldie-kun. Who else do you have lined up for the job? Teammate. That's actually a great idea. Kurenai pointed out, now feeling significantly better about the whole idea of the kids they trained being godparents as long as they were the kids that she trained. Why don't we go that route? What's wrong with my kids? Asuma asked, not recalling that only 30 seconds ago he was dreading all of the ways that Naruto would be a horrendous influence on his kid. He'd seen what Naruto had done with Kano Amaru, and while it was funny when it was his nephew and not really his problem, it wouldn't be so funny when it was his actual son or daughter, aside from the obvious. Naruto smokes dash dot. Kurenai flatly stated. I smoke. Asuma replied while cutting her off. Yeah, Asuma-sensei smokes and you fucked him. Naruto said before quickly covering his mouth in embarrassment. No. I mean dash. Well, I don't know how to put it any differently and you did. I'm sorry. Kurenai didn't flip out on him for the extremely blunt comment. She just looked over at Naruto with a raised eyebrow before getting back to Asuma, and Naruto's tact is a bit lacking. She added to her previous statement, Naruto honey, I love you but I really can't trust you to be responsible around a child. Naruto just nodded in understanding. If he had kids he probably wouldn't want 16-year-old him raising them either, which was kind of weird to think about actually. Ino got up and latched onto Naruto's side in a big hug. Oh, it's okay Goldie-kun. You'd be like the fun uncle. You know, the one that the kids love but the parents secretly hate because he's got no concept of productive child rearing whatsoever. It's not your fault. Asuma snorted at Ino's cheering up of Naruto. Kurenai, you think Naruto's bad? What do you think Kiba would do? Hana Urtsume would have to look over his shoulder every 5 minutes to make sure everything was alright. Kiba's like Naruto, but without the child-friendly traits. He's got Akamaru. Kids love dogs. Big dogs eat little babies. There's always Shino. Repeat what you just said and keep a straight face. She was unable to do so. Nobody could. Imagining Shino taking care of a child that was not supposed to be raised to be an Aburame was just a priceless sight. He wouldn't know what to do. I'm just gonna throw this out there and point out that none of this has anything to do with Genjutsu. Just saying. Shikamaru said, relaxing down on the couch, I am not getting involved in this talk. At this rate I'll be godfather to 2 couples' kids, and both couples are standing together. Even if one of the 2 couples hadn't hooked up yet. It was only a matter of time. Genjutsu later, godparents now. Ino said before turning her attention back to her sensei, now gimme godmother. Come on. She wanted a little godson or goddaughter to spoil in the very near future. If I'm not godfather you're sure not gonna be godmother Ino-chan. Naruto said, they'll probably get Hinata to do it or something if she wants to. Ino growled to herself at the thought of her rival in romance getting the completely meaningless title of godparent over her. Let it be known that Yamanaka Ino could get petty when the mood struck her. Ino just cut her eyes at her Jonin-sensei and his pregnant girlfriend. This isn't over. I'm going to make you realize just what a perfect choice I'd be. I've got so much love to give. Her grip steadily tightened on Naruto who started looking around a bit fearfully for something to cower me with just in case. I'd give that baby so much love it'd drown in it. Drown in it? So you'd spoil our kid rotten just like you were? Of course I would. That'd be my job. Sometime later, Akatsuki hideout. Orochimaru a thick, hunched figure in an Akatsuki robe commented as the communication jutsu that had previously been linking all of the Akatsuki members together ended. He's turning into a real nuisance. The puppeteer of the S-rank organization thought aloud. Heh. Sitting on a rock nearby, Deidara spun his straw hat in his hands idly with a smirk on his face, taking billions from the Gato company after Gato was killed in Shanokuni, getting his hands on a Jinchuriki key with a natural affinity for controlling the Sanbi. It looks like old Snakeface is building himself a legit fighting force here. Why'd you let him do as he pleased for so long? Because he wasn't a threat, Deidara. Sasori commented, cutting his eyes at the explosives specialist. There were more important things to tend to after Itachi sent him running off with his hand missing and his tail between his legs. Ah. Deidara replied, wagging a finger chidingly, Sasori no Dana, the guy was your partner before me. Are you seriously telling me that you didn't think Orochimaru was dangerous enough to recover and rebuild without Akatsuki backing him? Not enough to form a hidden village, that was actually hidden by the way, that was growing in strength to the extent that it was. But that was what had happened. Then again, that was why they had been slated with the mission to locate Orochimaru's most important chess piece in the Sanba Jinchuriki, Yukimaru. Who better to try and find Orochimaru's ace in the hole than the only member of Akatsuki that had partnered with him before his attempt to take Uchiha Itachi's body. We need to find him quickly. Sasori said as he began making his way to the exit of the hideout impatiently. I know what he's going to do. And if we're too late in finding the brat with the Sanbi, I don't think I want to face off with the person that'll have it when we get there. So are you just going to foreshadow, or are you actually going to tell me what that means? Shut up and lead the way, Deidara. You know this country better than I do. Konohagaku or no Sato, Ichiraku ramen. So you spent the whole day with him yesterday? Alone this time? Tenten asked, swirling around the food in her bowl with her chopsticks. You've been spending a lot of time with Naruto-chan since the funeral. She grinned at bringing up the old nickname she referred to Naruto by back when they were genin. He hated that. Why don't you just make your move on him already? Ino blew her blonde bang out of the way of her eye with a huff as she moved her own bowl out of the way. It's not like it's that easy. This isn't just any regular guy I can woo with a wink and a pretty laugh. This is Goldie-kun. He's different. And I don't want to get him right now anyway. With Iruka-sensei dying recently, that'd hang over the relationship the whole time if I could even hook up with him right around now. She didn't want to get him while he was vulnerable emotionally. She specialized in the psychological states of people, and there was almost never anything healthy about a romantic relationship that began under tragic circumstances. Where is he right now? Tenten asked. This is kind of his spot, so should you really be talking about this when he can pop in any second? He and Shikamaru had to show Asuma-sensei a jutsu or something. Ino answered, setting her chin down on her arms on the counter, some kind of guardian thing, super dangerous, blah blah blah. I don't know yet. Naruto had been training extremely hard since the funeral as well, and it was all Ino could do to make him take some sort of a break lately. She knew why he was doing it, but she couldn't rightfully say that it was healthy either. Sorry I'm late. They were then joined by the pink-haired member of Team 7 as Sakura dashed underneath the curtain and took her own seat with her fellow Kunoichi. I got held up from practice. So what's going on? Ino's trying to figure out how and when to bang her teammate. Tenten quipped, not balking when Ino fixed her with a glare, pretending that you're not isn't going to make doing it any easier. A smile came to Sakura's lips as she threw an arm over Ino's shoulder. Ino Pig is finally all grown up, switching her attention to a man she can actually get. Good of you to leave Sasuke-kun to the right woman. And by right woman she meant herself, of course. Goldie-kun is 10 times better than Sasuke. Ino replied, narrowing her eyes at her old friend and rival. They weren't fighting over the same boy anymore, but that didn't mean they couldn't fight over which boy was better. I'm past the pretty boys with Kekai Genkai. Yamanaka Ino needs a real man. And that real man is Naruto. Sakura said dryly, I'm going to actually give you a chance to amend that statement in any way you see fit before I actually jump on you for that. Outside of fights he's totally immature. Tenten was just amused at the path of the conversation and wanted the flames to be fanned hotter. Come on. Naruto-chan isn't that bad. Right? Listen to Tenten. Ino said as she mounted her counter-offensive against Sakura, I'm not amending anything. He's totally responsible or else he wouldn't have been a guardian ninja. He's definitely more fun than Sasuke is. And I know that Goldie-kun would be into having a relationship with someone. Possibly with her due to their previous interactions. Hell, just the prospect of someone getting in a cheap shot on her in a battle angered Naruto enough to go four tails to make sure he got the people that did it back. Damn the consequences. As scary as that thought was, it was kind of sweet. That meant something. It had to. And Sasuke-kun isn't. You know he isn't. Ino began to preen, growing in confidence as she carried on boldly, at least if I had sex with Naruto I know he'd definitely be into it. I'm pretty sure there's a good chance he'd break me before he was done too. A big grin spread across her face as Sakura's face reddened. Jinchuriki stamina don't you know? Oh, well, that's always fun. Tenten shimmered in from the sidelines. Do go on. And Sakura? Do you have anything to say in Sasuke's defense? Sakura wanted to say that Sasuke wouldn't be a slouch when the time came for things to get physical, probably. The problem for her though was still trying to get Sasuke to see her as more of a woman, not just a teammate. A problem Ino didn't seem to share. Yes, I do, as a matter of fact. Sakura rose to the bait/challenge eagerly. There's something to be said for a woman willing to wait for a man Ino pick. It's not all about sex, it's about being faithful too. Ino gave Sakura a dry stare once the topic of faithfulness was raised. I've been waiting for 3 years while Naruto's been off at the capital, surrounded by noble floozies, some insane chick with a shamisen, the worst adult influence I can possibly think of for a teenage boy, and Kami knows what else. With only Shikamaru to keep him from doing something completely stupid. Tenten added, a smirk growing on her face, that is pretty patient. You didn't even take any sucker dates with other guys in the meantime either. Someone cares. A thoughtful expression presented itself on the Team 10 Kunoichi's face as she tapped the side of her bowl. If I read Goldie's mind to see if he banged anyone while he was a guardian, would that make me a bad person? Ino asked innocently. Sakura just recoiled in shock. Yes. She said plainly, giving her an anxious look with her green eyes. Yes, it would. Behind the counter, Ayame just shook her head while leaning on the surface a few feet away from the conversation. You do know that I've heard everything you said this whole time, and that Naruto comes here all the time, right? Ino's eyes widened at forgetting a cardinal rule of eating establishments and information. Don't say anything in front of the staff that you were uncomfortable with being passed around openly. Looking around at her surroundings and then down at her almost finished food, she then realized why Naruto constantly shot his mouth off after eating there since childhood. It's this place. It's so comfortable it makes you not care about the things you say. As if she could read Ino's mind herself, Ayame's smile just stretched a little bit further. Does anyone want anything else to eat? She asked, angel-eyed informant to the stand's most loyal patron that she was. With Naruto, elsewhere in Konoha, Kabuto's apartment. He wanted to junk the place. The first thing Naruto wanted to do after he'd taken Shikamaru, Kiba, and Shiho over to Kabuto's place was to tear it apart. But they'd come there for a reason and they couldn't leave without finding something useful about the bastard. Sadly, that was slow going. Even with Kiba and Akamaru's noses, it was next to impossible to find anything usable when it came to tracking Kabuto down. If they could find him now, they would probably find some important Otogaku base or something, but they weren't even having any luck with step 1 of that plan yet, let alone steps 2 through infinity. It's like nobody even lived here. Kiba said, shaking his head after searching around for an hour. Akamaru whined and laid down on the floor at their lack of success thus far. What the hell, man? How long could a guy use a place and not leave any kind of ambient scent behind? It didn't make any sense. It went against everything he'd been taught about tracking. Everyone's home was supposed to have some sort of scent that was signature to them. It made tracking down missing nin from one's own village much easier. Unless Kabuto soaked everything he owned in disinfectant or something every single day, there should have been some sort of distinguishable smell there. I wasn't expecting much, but this is annoying. Shikamaru said, looking over Kabuto's living room. The place seemed totally impersonal. Kabuto was a genin for years before we'd met him, and this is the only place he's had to himself. He thought deeply before turning to Shiho with an idea. Wait, Kabuto doesn't have any family, does he? Shiho had brought Kabuto's record, and upon having some attention given to her by Shikamaru, she endeavored to be of assistance as she flipped through what files on him they had. Most of it by now was more than likely bunk, but for reference's sake she'd brought it along in case there were any useful parallels. Let's see. Naruto and Kiba even stopped searching around and waited to pay attention to see what Shiho had to say. That was a lot of pressure for her. Not only to try and look good in front of Shikamaru, but the others took her word seriously enough to closely listen. Well, it says here that Kabuto was found on a deserted battlefield when he was 7. The former captain of Konoha's medic corps who found him, Yakushi Nono, adopted him. She read, basically summarizing the info that she was flipping through. He went into the academy at 9, graduated at 10 amazingly enough, and then he languished as a genin until the age of 23 until, well, you know. Shikamaru took all of that in before finally saying something, "That doesn't make any sense. I read those files." He took what Shiho had away from her to look through them and found a docket on Nono complete with a profile picture. "No," Naruto said, shaking his head as he corrected Shikamaru once he got a good look at Kabuto's apparent adopted mother, "that doesn't make any sense because I know that lady. She used to run the goddamn orphanage at the edge of town I used to be in until I got the apartment." He bellowed, remembering vague bits and chunks from his early toddler days. "Why'd you say used to?" Kiba asked, wondering why Naruto was flipping out so hard. Naruto tapped his finger on her picture. Yes, he definitely remembered that woman. He could never forget a kindly smile like that back in the days when the ones he received were few and far between. But she always had one for him. There wasn't much to recall that far back, but that memory was prominent. Then she just up and disappeared and no one ever saw her again. He still remained at that orphanage though until he was old enough to be gifted his own place to stay by the Hokage. As much as it was a shame to realize nowadays, eventually the kindly caretaker that had only been in his life during the portions of it where memory was hard to come by slipped into the deep reaches of his mind. "Kabuto's 7 years older than us," Naruto said. "If Nono adopted Kabuto and put him in the academy I think I'd remember him, or he'd remember me. I don't, he didn't, so that means that he wasn't in the orphanage when I was there." Shikamaru gave Naruto a dead severe look after his short tirade. "Are you sure?" Naruto nodded. "If I'm wrong Kiba can shave my head with my machete and take pictures." The Inuzuka ninja's eyes lit up at the offer on Naruto's pride and honor. He was serious. Shiho couldn't help but feel her face going redder and redder at what she was reading. This was horrible contingency. Who used to keep archive records before she got the job as a genin? They needed to be hanged and shot for negligence. She could have done, and did do, a better job back when she was a 12-year-old genin under apprenticeship. The records said that Nono disappeared before Kabuto ever enlisted in the academy. Either the person in charge of admissions was bribed or was just stupid. Complete incompetence. She shouted, surprising the 3 chunin in the room with her. If someone kept decent records, none of this would have happened to begin with. Iruka-sensei wouldn't have been killed, and our codes wouldn't have been leaked to the enemy for the last 10 years. Whoa, whoa, whoa. Shikamaru walked over to her and set his hands on the back of her shoulders, rubbing them to calm her down before she strangled someone. The girl was certainly spirited about her job. "It's not your fault. It's none of our faults. It's just troublesome that we're the ones that are figuring this crap out when older people should have been on the ball. It's good that we got it now, so just calm down." It took a few minutes, but the blonde bookworm's breathing did even out and she calmed enough to take her glasses off and wipe the fog off of them after she'd steamed them up out of her anger. "It's okay," she said to herself, "it's alright. I'm fine. Thank you Shikamaru-kun." "Well, who was in charge of academy admissions?" Kiba asked, feeling Shiho's anger for her. "If they're still alive I'll just bust their ass for you. I'm really pissed off about this. Who overlooks that on someone's entry forms?" Taking the files to look over Kabuto's academy admission paperwork, he went wide-eyed. "Whoa, too late. One of us already busted his ass." "What the hell are you talking about?" Shikamaru wondered. Kiba's outlook certainly changed in a hurry. "Admissions is an academy grunt job. You're basically a male secretary and do paperwork all day." It was one of Shikamaru's ideal jobs to have as a chunin. All he ever wanted out of life: minimal responsibility, little manual labor. A trained monkey could do that job, but they had people do it and they paid you for it. All you needed to work that job was the ability to read and thumbs. And not even thumbs on both arms, just a thumb on one hand, which was why it was an entry-level academy position. "Admissions is an academy grunt job," Kiba explained with a smirk growing on his face. For once he knew something that smartpants Shikamaru didn't. He liked that feeling. Back when Kabuto entered the academy the guy in charge of admissions was Naruto asked, about to punch Kiba in the stomach and take the files to read them himself if he didn't give them the answer. "Just wait, I'm letting it build for dramatic effect," Kiba said before yelping in pain when Akamaru bit down on his ankle. "Ow." "Fine, traitor." The guy doing the job back then was Mizuki-sensei. As in their former teacher Mizuki. As in the guy whose ass Naruto beat ragged for tricking him into stealing the scroll of seals after he failed his grad exam and subsequently trying to murder him and Eureka. Shiho just watched them all look at each other with similar bewildered expressions before venturing to say something, so I should probably get all of this written up and see if we can't get Mizuki transferred from prison to interrogation. She asked, getting unanimous nods from them all. Should I request Yamanaka Ino-san to do it? Naruto was about to say yes until Shikamaru covered his mouth to stop him from talking. No. Request Marino Ibiki. Ino would just wind up reading his mind, no matter how upset she'd be while doing the interrogation. Ibiki on the other hand would break that son of a bitch first if he didn't cough up the intel on the spot. Shikamaru could be remarkably vengeful and devious when he felt the motivation, and if Mizuki was what he thought that he felt entirely justified to be so. Outside of Konoha's gates, Hagane Katetsu and Kamizuki Izumo were fairly talented shinobi. They had been promoted to chunin through the exam system when they were still teenagers, which was pretty impressive at the time, and even though they weren't anywhere near getting promotions to jonin anytime soon, they were still rather reliable. They were experienced, they were both still very young at the age of 28, and they knew how to do most if not all necessary jobs that a ninja at their level would need to know how to do excellently. Still though, it had been a while since they'd seen anything this weird happen at the front gate. A quarter of a mile down the road they could see a figure sitting down in the middle of the dirt path, not moving an inch. He'd been there for a few hours now, but he wasn't doing anything. Entire teams of shinobi returning from missions and leaving on others had passed him, as did just regular visitors to the village, but so far no one had said a thing about him other than that he was just looking straight ahead and seemingly waiting for something while scribbling away in a notebook and muttering rhymes to himself. Go see what he wants. Katetsu demanded of his partner as they stared at the man. He was far enough away that they couldn't make out any of his features, but they were sharp-eyed enough that they could clearly see he was there. If someone higher up comes around and asks us why we didn't go check this guy out, we're gonna get our nuts toasted. It could be a trap. Izumo responded, what if he's just waiting for a Konoha ninja to get close to him and then bam. Kidnapped, killed, used as breeding stock. Who would use us as breeding stock? We don't even have Kekai Genkai. Neither does the Sandai Me. Awesome in of itself is an inherited trait, and that's super valuable, you know. Great, so that still means we're safe. Why do you have to be like that, man? Screw this. Katetsu said, even if he does kill us, if he's there doing wrong and we get in trouble for not doing anything about it, Ibiki'll safety pin our scrities. Both men looked at each other and shared sickened looks. Well, if he does attack us, look at it this way, we're within screaming distance of the village. Both of them fist bumped and sighed before heading out to get to the bottom of things. Both walked down the path to reach their target with a paranoia in their bellies that can only take form after years and years of dodging death and dealing it right back. And it only got stronger as they got closer. Katetsu, if one of us dies, can I have your conch mace? Izumo asked under his breath. Ignoring that, the long-standing chunin finally reached the strange dark-skinned man in white. A Kumo ninja of all things from the looks of his flak jacket and headband, and man, he was carrying a lot of swords. Can we help you? Katetsu ventured to ask tentatively, is there any reason a Kumo ninja would be sitting right here in front of the gate? Do you want to come in or something? There wasn't any word that anyone from Kumo Gakure was supposed to be on the way to Konoha. No messages or anything of the sort. Nope. Killer Bee's just fine, no doubt. Wait in here for Mr. 9 to come out. Both Konoha chunin looked at each other strangely before Izumo just decided to speak up. Who's Mr. 9? Because he knew pretty much everyone worth talking about inside of Konoha's gates. It came with the territory of manning the front door almost every damn day, and he hadn't heard of anyone that would go by that title. Well, I didn't think I'd meet a person that could flat out beat a messenger hawk here all the way from Kumo. Turning around, Izumo and Katetsu saw a man standing on the top of the gateway, obscured somewhat by the setting sun at his back as he jumped off and into the air. He was able to clear most of the distance between them in one mighty jump before landing on the ground with a crash of wooden sandals smashing into the earth. They of course knew who this was and saw fit to move out of the way. Jiraiya-sama. I'll take it from here. Jiraiya told them, shooing them back to their post as he walked up to Killer Bee, the Hachibijin Shuriki. Yeah? What's it to ya, old man? B said brazenly, still sitting stubbornly on the ground, apparently with no machinations on budging anytime soon. If you ain't got Mr. 9 in that big ass scroll you're totin', you should probably keep on moving, and I ain't jokin'. B, this man isn't a weakling. This is Jiraiya of Konoha's Sunin. You've heard about this guy. The Hachiba warned Killer B from inside of his body, don't do anything hasty. The entire reason you're sitting out here and waiting on Konoha's Jinchuriki is because you didn't want to do something that would make too much trouble for Kumo with Konoha yet. I ain't gonna fight him 8-0, Killer B thought to his Biju, just letting him know what the drill is. With a sigh, Jiraiya sat down in front of Killer B, right there on the road with him. Well, you see, I can't let that just happen either, because if Naruto comes out here you'll challenge him, and he probably won't back down because he doesn't give a damn about his own well-being. And I can't just let you kill him. I won't just let you kill him. Killer B just nodded and began sizing Jiraiya up. He was pretty mellow, but he was completely serious about staying there and not letting him get to Naruto. You heard enough about world-famous shinobi that you expected them all to be a certain way. It was always interesting to see what they were like up close and personal. Jiraiya pulled out a notebook of his own and began flipping through it with a pen in hand as well. If he was going to be sitting there all evening he might as well do something productive and work on his next book, and I've got to find some way to get you out of here because the longer we're here the more people will talk, and once this gets around to Naruto, short of Sarutobi-sensei himself ordering Naruto to back down he probably won't do it. Luckily, Naruto's preoccupation with something unhealthy and trying to find some way to pursue Kabuto would keep him from getting involved in something even more unhealthy, a battle with the perfect Jinchuriki. He's not ready for that yet. He was getting there, able to keep control when Jiraiya loosened the seal and forced Naruto to undergo the Four Tails transformation, but from the way it hurt him and how he couldn't go any further than that, he still had quite a way to go. To take on a Jinchuriki that can unleash the full power of the Hachiba, he's definitely not ready. And honestly, even if he was, Jiraiya didn't want that battle being fought anywhere near Konoha. The sheer amount of power that Naruto would need to clash with that beast of a man, if he ever gained it, that fight definitely wouldn't be taking place just outside of the gate. Is there any way we can handle this without all of the violence and the big explosions and the blood? Jiraiya asked, perusing his own book notes while Killer B looked over his rhyme book. I mean, this whole thing is getting old with Kumo and Konoha going back and forth. What you talking about, fool? Don't talk history with me like I study the shit. Kumo ambushes the Daime Hokage and kills him. Konoha busts Kumo's ass for the rest of that war. Kumo kidnaps our last Jinchuriki Kushina. Minato gets her back and busts Kumo's ass again for the rest of that war. Kumo tries to abduct the little Hyuga girl 13 years ago during peace meetings to stop another war and your kidnapper gets offed, but you end up getting fooled in a switcheroo when you try to blackmail a Byakugan out of the deal anyway. It wouldn't gone down like before though, not with Killer B on the battlefield, yo. Killer B boasted with a wide grin, even if we fought that war, Kumo woulda won FO show. They probably would have. Konoha had taken substantial damage during the prior war, and the destruction that had occurred from when the Kyuubi had attacked just added on to that. 3 years wasn't a good amount of time to recover from those things and fight a war. This was going to lead to another one of those if the world leaders hadn't learned from history, because small skirmishes at the borders and across the countryside in countries all over led to the last big one. The quickest path to war that Jiraiya could think of was Kumo's Jinchuriki battling Konoha's Jinchuriki. If Naruto lost, that would let the entire world know that theirs was subpar to Kumo's, and it would lead to no shortage of chest puffing, even though Naruto was better than many elsewhere. If Naruto won, compounded with the fact that Naruto had already killed the Raikage's right-hand man, it would piss off even more and he probably would start a war to save face. These stipulations weren't even taking into consideration the possibility that one or the other would die in battle. If one or both were killed during the fight, all bets would be off and a war would definitely happen. And the one being killed would more than likely be Naruto, unless Killer B was the type that was gracious in victory. So you think that you can just saunter on up here and challenge Naruto to an old-school moonlight duel? Jiraiya asked, and you think I can possibly let that happen? Because he'd definitely accept. I ain't leaving till Mr. 9 comes out. Killer B repeated. And really there were no grounds to use force to remove him. He wasn't doing this inside of the village, he hadn't declared that his intentions with Naruto were to inflict harm on him, and he wasn't really doing anything. He was just sitting there. Attacking him first without the slightest grounds to do so would definitely lead to an international incident. Nobody wanted to fight Killer Bee, period. That was just unintelligent, and not only for the political reasons. Jiraiya just sighed, yeah, we've already established that. This was going to be a long wait. That particular entrance and exit to the village was officially closed down for the time being, and the entire road was locked down to divert travelers another way. No one was to go that way until the all-clear was given, and word about what was transpiring there was to kept as low-key as possible. At least Hiruzen was on the ball with this one for sure, but waiting out Killer Bee might be more difficult than anyone figured it would be. Konoha Intelligence Division HQ, Cold Interrogation Room. Naruto stood behind the one-way mirror of the observation area and looked through it to see one of his former teachers, Mizuki, sitting in a chair while tightly shackled, arms behind the back of the furniture. Time in prison had apparently done him good physically. He was ripped, and it could be seen even through the prison uniform he was wearing. Kabuto was a spy that had been ferrying off Konoha information to Orochimaru, keeping the smaller Otogaku one step ahead of the competition long enough for them to build up substantial resources and power. If Shikamaru's hunch was on, there was no way Kabuto would have gotten into the academy without an inside man. You know, staring at him like that isn't going to magically get him to spill everything he knows. Ino's voice rang out in Naruto's ears before he felt her delicate weight drift over his back and the fabric of her Konoha Tani uniform, wrapping her arms around his neck fondly. How are you doing, Goldie? I don't know. Naruto said, setting his head against hers and shutting his eyes. Iruka-sensei's funeral was a week ago. Should I still be this mad? I've never had this happen before. Having someone close to me die, I mean. It's not just that an important person to you died, Naruto. Ino said, enjoying the close contact for as long as she could get it. Someone that you thought was trustworthy did it, and he screwed us all over. Kabuto won't get away with it. It wasn't Kabuto getting away with it that he was afraid of. Karma had a way of getting its knee up into the groins of others one way or another. Jiraiya warned him about what hatred could lead to. Hatred was the thing that gave the Kyuubi influence over him. Naruto of all people couldn't allow himself to walk around with his anger stewing. But he just didn't know how to let it go. His loved ones could dull it. Training could put it at the back of his mind for a short while, but he couldn't keep it out of his head. If he actually came across Kabuto, he didn't know what he would do. I don't know. Naruto said, I mean, we're kind of late to get our lead from here, aren't we? We have to start somewhere. Reasoned Ino. She had a point. Mizuki was probably the best starting point that they had to go from. Come on. Don't get all drab and frowny on me now. Naruto turned his head and looked into Ino's eyes to find her doing the same with him. She grinned at their proximity and pushed her forehead against the goggles on his in something of an intimate gesture. He'd been through a lot and seen a ton of things, but Naruto was really a bundle of nerves when it came to the topic of intimacy with Ino. Training with Jiraiya and living with the people that comprised the Guardian Ninja took away every last scrap of his shame in almost every definition of the word, but this woman made him feel like he was 12 and just getting used to receiving positive attention from a pretty girl. Hey? Naruto asked, swallowing to get his swagger back and muster his nerve up again. Ino-chan. When this is over and you interrogate Mizuki, would you maybe want to come with me somewhere? Man, the way he said that was so uncool. He learned how to better talk to girls and even operated smoothly around Ino before. But that was for play, that was so lame. You couldn't have thought of something more awesome to say than that. Ino on the other hand didn't seem to be flustered in the least. Are you asking me out? Her father didn't raise her to be meek and indirect about how she felt, and she was just glad that Naruto finally seemed to be getting over whatever hang-up he had when it came to getting closer to her. What? PSSHT. No. Ino gave him a deadpan stare before placing a hand on the top of his head and shutting her own eyes, as if she were about to use her mind-reading jutsu. Yes. I'm asking you out, dammit. Don't read my mind. I'd never dream of it, dear. And I'd love to. She gave him a peck on the cheek and a wink for his troubles. You don't have to be so nervous. It's just me. I'm not gonna poison you or something for saying something silly. I'm used to it by now after all. That was nice, and somewhat backhanded, but hey, whatever. Ino was Ino, and if she wasn't her he wouldn't be into it. The sound of a door opening in the interrogation room separated the two, which was odd because from inside the room no one could see them behind the one-way mirror. Ino's father Inoichi was the one that had entered, and Ino felt kind of weird doing anything like that with her dad within sight, even if he had no idea what was going on behind that glass. Inoichi just paced in front of the table that Mizuki was seated in front of, rubbing his chin as Mizuki just watched him walk around. So are you letting me out of prison at last? The former teacher sneered, almost 4 years of prison time with no end in sight just for attacking Uzumaki of all people? That seems really harsh. You have a point. Inoichi said, stopping to face the disgraced shinin. Getting beaten up by a kid that technically hadn't graduated the academy had to be enough of a punishment, huh? I wonder how well that went over for you in prison when everyone found out about it. Mizuki growled at him angrily at the humiliating defeat being brought up. I didn't lose to a boy. The former school teacher spat bitterly, I lost to the Kyubi. The Kyubi had nothing to do with it, but whatever makes you feel better. That wasn't the point of this little session though. Tell me, about 13 years ago or so, were you approached about entering a Yakushi Kabuto into the academy as a new student? It was best to get down to brass tacks to get this over with as soon as possible. No sense in beating around the bush. They'd go in head first. Instead of denying anything or trying to feign ignorance on the matter, Mizuki just began to chuckle. Soon however, that chuckling erupted into full-blown laughter that grew more and more maniacal and mocking in its tone. Oh, this is just too good. Mizuki said, calming down as an actual tear of mirth came to his eye. Oh, it took you that long to catch on? Honestly, that's just priceless. I didn't think it'd go under the radar really. I figured you'd bust him in school, and then after he actually graduated, but years rolled by and nothing. Man oh man, when I heard you put him in that shinin exam that got projected all over the place. I fucking died laughing in my cell and nobody knew why. He even managed to get 2 more kids in Kabuto's class to defect to Orochimaru for power as well. What were their names? Yoroi and Misumi. Whatever. They died years ago, so they weren't really much more than grunt material. Still, every army needed foot soldiers. So you were bribed after all? Inoichi said with a dark look on his face, even back then Mizuki? Unforgivable. And this was the man that they'd put in charge of their children for so many years. Mizuki just shook his white mane of hair around. Orochimaru-sama understands what makes a man like me tick. All of this village's talk about the will of fire, and protecting the people, and all of that crap, the only things that matters are power and understanding the truth. Why are you freely telling us all of this now? Inoichi asked, I haven't even begun to interrogate you yet. Because none of what I've said matters. Nothing I just told you is actually important. Mizuki said with as much of an arrogant shrug as he could muster, it doesn't matter that you've got me trapped here. You can interrogate me all you want, you can try your cheap mind-reading jutsu and it still won't work. I'll tell you what's going to happen the moment you do. He jerked his head to the entrance, the minute you try to pull something that's actually useful out of me I'll be getting up and walking out of that door. The Yamanaka head narrowed his eyes at Mizuki, who was far too smug for his tastes. But why? He was a prisoner, but he never seemed to see going to the Konoha strict correctional facility as anything less than a mere setback according to reports on his progress. But he wasn't talking either. At least not about anything more than propaganda and drivel about how out of the loop they were. So Inoichi had to try and call his bluff. Walking up to Mizuki who was grinning with his head lowered, Inoichi shut his eyes and placed one hand on his head. He didn't have the mind-reading amplification machine available at the moment, but there was no rush. He could take all the time he needed to break through whatever mental defenses Mizuki had set. He had to have them because he was so confident that Inoichi would never find anything. But once the connection was made and Mizuki's entire body was forced to relax and succumb to the jutsu, something in his throat seemed to relax and force him to swallow. Both Naruto and Ino saw that behind the one-way mirror and wondered what the hell it was. That was an actual object, Goldie-kun. I saw it. Naruto said before noticing black markings under the short sleeves of Mizuki's prison-issued uniform. Those weren't there before. Wait, those look like seals. The walls were too thick for Naruto to try and sense through, but if he'd been able to he would have been able to feel Mizuki's chakra intensity spike. The only indication they got that something was happening was when Mizuki's muscles suddenly expanded and he broke his bindings behind his back. Inoichi quickly snapped out of his jutsu and put his arms up in time to block a punch that knocked him into the mirror hard enough to crack it. Not wasting a moment, Mizuki broke through the door and out into the hallway only to meet Naruto coming out of the adjacent viewing room to face him, Ino rushing past him to get into the interrogation room to ensure her father was alright. It took a second for Mizuki to recall who it was standing in his path to escape granted to him by Kabuto's experimental drug and cursed seal, but the features were the same as someone he knew, just a little bit more grown up. Naruto just stared him down and noted that he had some strange black markings on his face as well that looked like tiger stripes. Well, if it isn't Naruto, Mizuki said with a laugh, making great efforts to look as big and imposing as possible. Rematch time. In a sudden move he lunged at Naruto, grabbing for his throat only to miss the strike and hear the jingle of a chain. Looking down he saw a single tight loop around his waist sticking tightly and felt himself get yanked directly backwards. What kind of dash? Rasengan, spiraling sphere. Naruto slammed a Rasengan directly into the base of Mizuki's spine, driving it deep enough to carve a mark into him. It shot Mizuki down the hall like a bullet, but the chain remained wrapped around his waist and pulled him back and up into the air, through the ceiling. He was then slammed back onto the floor on top of his head, hard enough to bust the floor. Setsudenki Kyujo, slingshot extermination. Mizuki stuck straight up in the air, half of his body driven through the floor. This was the sight that Ino and Inoichi saw when the dutiful daughter helped her father up and out of the interrogation room. Rematch over. Naruto quipped, reeling the chain back into the tenketsu in his arm that it had extended from underneath his arm warmer. I think I win again, Tabia. Inoichi just stared at Mizuki as Naruto plucked him out of the hole he'd created down to the lower floor and dropped him on the ground. He wasn't moving, but he wasn't dead. Naruto hit him in the spine and then slammed him on the top of his head. Did you paralyze him? You still needed him, right? Naruto asked, not sparing Mizuki a second glance. He was just a ghost from his past that could start him on a trail to get to Kabuto. That was all, freaky weird cursed seal and everything. That's something. You didn't answer my question, Naruto. Naruto just shrugged. He broke out. He attacked you and me. Now he isn't gonna do that again. Yay. The Guardian Ninja group didn't have a lot of wiggle room to fuck around in their work. You had to have somebody killed? They killed them. You had to keep someone alive for some reason? You'd better tell them what condition you needed them in beforehand or you'd be getting back whatever you got. No complaints allowed after the fact. Ino just looked down at the broken criminal and then to Naruto before raising an eyebrow. Anybody ever tell you that you fight scary now, Goldie-kun? And who's fixing this, by the way? Silence lingered between the three of them until more ninja that had been populating the building at the time came to secure the area and find out what was going on. Genin. Naruto answered questioningly. Inoichi nodded absently. Yeah, that's a D-rank mission. What about him though? Ino dear. Yeah. Ino said, kneeling down by Mizuki to begin working on healing him as best as she could on site. I'll make sure he can keep going. Her palms began to glow green as she held them over Mizuki's wounds. Did I ever tell you I really don't like this job, Daddy? Inoichi just sent a wry smile down to his daughter in return. You think I do? Undisclosed location, Otagakuer base. Good to have you back, Kabuto-kun. Orochimaru said with a rather twisted smile as his right-hand man, lead scientist, and top medic finally returned to his good graces permanently. The prodigal son returns and all of that other sentimental noise. I'm touched, Orochimaru-sama. Kabuto replied with a chuckle as the two of them walked through the dark corridors of the hidden base. But since I'm here I've got to know, how is your pet project coming along? I haven't seen Yukimaru in quite a while. Ah, the Sanbijin Shuriki. So devoted to his words. He swore that he would make the young man strong. Give him the power to protect the people that were important to him, such as another of his elites in Gurren. He never told him exactly how he was going to ensure that the boy gained that power. It would be obtained through him. through Orochimaru taking his body and making it his own. Yukimaru could live vicariously from within his consciousness him the way that the other souls he had shoved aside to take their bodies did. The loss of Otogaku's land holdings in Mizu no Kuni was a shame, but it was not a sacrifice without benefit. That stone had almost been bled dry by the time that he'd gotten what was left of his investment out, right before the base quite literally fell. The loss of Kimimaro and my lovely island facility was a shame. Orochimaru said, never losing his smile as the extremely pale man led Kabuto along. Kimimaro was strong enough to take on and hold his own against my former comrades in Akatsuki. It's hard to believe that he was defeated by Konoha's imperfect Jinchuriki. I think Naruto-kun is an interesting fellow personally. Kabuto offered as a rebuttal of opinion, we were friends for a while after all. The humor from that wasn't lost on Orochimaru, who actually laughed to himself. I killed his first teacher before I left. An unfortunate run-in. Oh, I'm sure you're so broken up about it. Orochimaru quipped, but I have no use for a Jinchuriki that can barely control the beast inside of him. Yukimaru is the perfect host body. His chakra quells the Sanbi. If he had the will to do so, he could control its powers freely. And that was what Orochimaru planned to do once he was inside of his body. With all of that wonderful power in the palm of his hand, he could finally begin his push to getting everything he wanted for himself. He would need Kabuto to oversee the last few modifications he wanted to make to Yukimaru's body before he would take it over. He couldn't wait. Kabuto couldn't have taken to departing from Konoha quickly enough for his tastes. He wanted him to get right to work as soon as possible. As far as Orochimaru and his little operation in Otogaku was concerned, things couldn't have been going smoother for him. That's it for part 28. Thank you for watching and see you on the next video.